Welcome to HP Fanfiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. Right on cue, the kitchen door opened and a tall, muscular young man wearing a fitted white t-shirt and beige combat trousers entered the room. His hair was cut short and he had well-groomed stubble adorning his face that was quite regal. He looked like he was related to Sirius in some way. Upon the man's entry, Kingsley had shot to his feet and pointed his wand at the visitor as the others simply stared open-mouthed at him. "Who the hell are you?" he questioned dangerously. The young man turned to stare at him unwaveringly, even when he noticed the wand of an aura was pointed at him. Instead, his green eyes came alive with an inferno that exuded power, and Kingsley felt himself falter at the display. In a blink of an eye, the man had removed his wand and disarmed the aura with ease. He stood pointing a strange black and white wand of his own at Kingsley, who gulped at the position he found himself in. "That was not a polite way to introduce yourself," the arrival stated with a raised eyebrow, and tossed the wand back to the stunned older man. Sirius started to snicker at what had just transpired, and Dumbledore sat in his chair with his eyes twinkling like they hadn't done in months. It was Minerva who first recognized the young man in front of them from the rest of the group. "Potter?" she asked hesitantly, clearly not believing this could be the same boy she had been teaching for the last 4 years. Harry turned and offered his head of house a genuine smile. "It is good to see you, Professor," he said truthfully. The Transfiguration Professor returned his smile in a rare show of emotion from her, but before anything else could be said, Molly Weasley spoke up. "Harry," she shouted, charging towards the young man, who stopped her in her tracks. He held by the shoulders and looked at her speculatively before placing a kiss on her cheek and bringing the woman into a gentle embrace. "It's good to see you too, Mrs. Weasley," he whispered. "I'm sorry what happened to Arthur. I hope he is okay," he added in a questioning tone. "Arthur will be fine, Harry. He is at home resting right now," she replied, clearly happy to see the young man looking so well. "You have grown," she added, looking at the teen critically, trying to find something in which she could chide him about. "That does usually happen at my age, Mrs. Weasley," Harry pointed out with a smirk, to which the woman playfully hit him on the shoulder. Harry scanned the room to look at the rest of the occupants. He had to admit that not many looked like they would be much use in a fight, but he was sure they had their reasons for being here, and he would not judge them based on their appearances. He paused when he spotted Tonks with her pink hair and could not resist the temptation to embarrass the young Aurora. "Ah, Miss Tonks," he began with a bow. "I'm glad to see you are wearing your hair. My favorite way to see it. Did Sirius tell you I was coming so you could go to the effort for me?" he asked, with a wink. Sirius began snickering again, and Tonks turned her usual shade of red when Harry spoke to her like that. She scowled at her cousin before answering the question. "No, Potter, Sirius did not tell me you would be here," she replied, still scowling at the marauder. "And there was me thinking you wanted to share another intimate moment with me." Harry responded, shaking his head in mock disappointment, causing the young woman to redden even more, and Sirius to roar in laughter. "And I do believe I told you I wished to be addressed by my first name at our last encounter. I thought we had gotten over this," he added. "And what is this?" Mrs. Weasley cut in with her hands on her hips. "You are much too old and experienced for Harry," she said flatly to the metamorph, who began stuttering incoherently at the woman. "It is okay, Mrs. Weasley," Harry placated, coming to Tonks' rescue. "I was talking about us dueling, that is all," he explained to the irate redhead. "However," he added, looking quite mischievous, "if you knew what I had been up to, I'm sure you would believe that I was too experienced for Miss Tonks here," he concluded with mirth evident in his eyes. "And what have you been up to, young man?" she asked, turning her ire onto Harry. "Well," he mused, "most recently I spent time with a group of 11 Vila on the continent. It does appear there is some truth to the rumors of my whereabouts," he added, scratching his chin. "You did what?" the redhead screeched, flushing in both anger and embarrassment. Snape suddenly stood in realization. "It was you," he said disbelievingly, pointing a slightly shaking hand at Harry. "You killed those men," he elaborated in an accusing tone. Harry turned to look at the potions master. Every indication of joviality was now absent from his expression, which was now entirely impassive, with a slight coldness that was immediately reflected in the temperature of the room. "And what if I did Snape?" Harry questioned dangerously. "Some of your friends, were they?" he asked neutrally. Snape was taken aback at the confidence and lack of remorse Potter was displaying. He was used to the young man being compliant and a tad rebellious at best. "Killed?" Molly questioned, looking at Harry with concern. "Harry is not a killer," she denied firmly, shaking her head. "This is a war, Mrs. Weasley," Harry retorted. "Sacrifices have to be made," he said sternly. "You are a 15-year-old boy," she responded heatedly. "You are a child. It is not your responsibility," she finished. "My childhood never began," Harry hissed angrily in response, his magic starting to leak from him in his rage. Molly shuddered at the anger she could feel from the young man and turned to Albus, who was looking quite upset. "Surely you don't agree with him, Albus?" she stated. "On the contrary, Molly, I agree with him entirely," the headmaster sighed sadly. The occupants of the room all shared looks of shock at the headmaster's proclamation. "Now, if you will excuse us, I believe myself and Harry have much to discuss," he explained, standing. "I am sure if you wait for us, then Harry will be happy to introduce himself properly when our business is concluded," he added, giving Harry a look, who nodded in response. Harry made to leave but turned back to the occupants of the room, who were all lost in their own thoughts. "Auror Moody," he questioned, the grizzled man, "I will have a vow of silence from Snape before I leave. Can I trust you to ensure he remains here?" he asked. "Aye, lad," Moody replied with a nod. "He won't be going anywhere," he promised, giving Snape a glare. Harry nodded and followed Dumbledore from the kitchen up to the drawing-room. Both men entered and took a seat. It was Dumbledore that broke the silence that had befallen between them. "It is good to see you in such good health, my boy," he began. "My apologies, Harry," he added. "I refer to you as a boy, and yet you sit before me nothing short of being a man, something I fear I have helped very little in," he sighed apologetically. "It is good to see you too, Professor," Harry replied. "And I am very sorry about Hagrid. I know you were very close and he always spoke highly of you," he said genuinely. "Yes, it is most unfortunate that he met his end in such a way," the old man responded sadly, looking every year of his ample age. "You have no reason to apologize to me, Professor," Harry spoke after a moment. "More than ever, I understand the need to make difficult choices," he added knowingly. "I am glad you see it that way, Harry, but I must explain my reasoning so you can understand my decisions fully," the old man requested. Harry nodded at the headmaster, allowing him to continue. "The night in which Tom came to Godric's Hollow was one of the most difficult of my life," he began with a sigh. "Thinking that Sirius was the secret keeper left me in a very delicate situation," he continued. "I simply did not know who I could trust, and after considering my options it seemed that your mother's sister was the best option, something I can see I was severely mistaken about," he said sorrowfully, looking Harry in the eye. "Sir, who performed the Fidelius charm on my parents' home?" Harry asked curiously. "I believe that it was your grandfather. There are very few capable of casting the charm, and he was the only other besides me and Tom, of course, who would have been capable. I did offer, but your father ensured me it was taken care of," he explained. Harry nodded and accepted what he had been told, without question, knowing that it was likely to be the truth. "I know now that your childhood was most unpleasant, Harry, and for that I can only apologize for my part in it," Dumbledore continued, hanging his head in shame. "You weren't to know it would be that bad," Harry understood, "and as you said yourself, you couldn't be sure who you could trust," he added with a shrug. "Thank you for being so understanding, Harry, but it is something I cannot forgive myself for," he responded, sadly shaking his head. "It is one of those difficult choices I spoke of, that I had to make," he added. The two remained silent for a moment, lost in their thoughts. It was Dumbledore who once again broke the silence. "After seeing how close you had become to young Mr. Weasley and young Miss Granger in your first year, I had intended on making inquiries to see if you could be placed with them during the summer holidays at one of their homes." Dumbledore admitted to surprise of Harry, "But Tom resurfaced and I knew it would not be wise. The wards around your aunt's home would be required again," he finished sadly. Harry nodded at his reasoning. He would not have wanted either the Weasleys or Grankers to be in any danger because of him. Then we had the unfortunate events of your second year, and when you handed me Tom Riddle's diary, I knew it had to be investigated further," he continued. "Just a few short weeks later, Sirius escaped from Azkaban, and I knew you were still safest behind the wards. After the incident with your aunt, I was content to allow you to be in Diagon Alley. I thought some exposure to Wizarding World would be good for you and start to prepare you for your adult life here. I knew it would be unlikely that Sirius would try to approach you while you were there." He explained quickly, clearly not comfortable discussing what he saw as his failures. "I had planned on working with you in your fourth year in some way, but with your name coming out of the Goblet, I knew it would not be possible," he continued when he saw that Harry would not bespeak. "And now we find ourselves here," he concluded. Harry thought about what the old man had been saying and found that he held nothing against the headmaster. He knew had he been in the same position he would have done what he saw fit also, and believed that the professor had done just that. "It is in the past now, Professor. None of it really matters now," Harry said, attempting to assure the man he had no ill feelings towards him. Dumbledore smiled at Harry and then suddenly looked reproachful again. "If only that was all the guilt I carry," he sighed, downtrodden and shaking his head once again. Harry looked at the professor with a raised eyebrow and waited for him to proceed. "Before you were born, a prophecy was made," Dumbledore revealed sadly, his voice laced with guilt. "Is this what your people are guarding in the Department of Mysteries?" Harry questioned. Dumbledore was shocked by the observation, but didn't question how Harry knew. He assumed that whoever Harry had been staying with had significant connections. "Yes," he replied sadly, his eyes losing the last hint of twinkle they had. Harry sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "It has something to do with me and Voldemort, doesn't it?" he asked. "It does," Dumbledore confirmed, looking sadder by the minute. "Does it specifically say who will win in a fight between us?" Harry asked further. "No, it does not," Dumbledore replied, looking confused. "Then it doesn't matter what it says," Harry dismissed. "You don't want to know?" the old man asked incredulously. "No," Harry said firmly, shaking his head. "I don't like the idea that I am on some predestined path. Either way, me and Tom will meet because I want him dead just as much as he does me. I am at an advantage right now because he believes he has succeeded and has given me time to prepare." Harry explained, "A prophecy means nothing to me, Professor, because one way or the other it will be me or him. I refuse for it to be any other way. So I would suggest you advise your people not to engage him. He is mine." Harry warned resolutely. It was seldom that Dumbledore was truly surprised anymore, but Harry had managed it. He nodded at what the young man had said, knowing it would inevitably be the way he described. "I will call off the guard as you wish, Harry, but I would recommend that the prophecy not be left in its current location," Dumbledore suggested. "Am I right to assume, then, that only Tom and I can take it?" Harry asked, knowing that Dumbledore would have moved it if he could have. "Indeed," Dumbledore affirmed with a nod. "Then I can use that to my advantage when the time is right." Harry intoned thoughtfully. "How so?" the old man asked curiously. "Well, I assume that Tom is not going to walk into the ministry to get it himself," Harry began. "That is a safe assumption," Dumbledore mused, stroking his chin. "Then he will need me to collect it, and then he will have me ambushed," Harry continued. "That would be his plan, I imagine," Dumbledore agreed. "Then I shall leave it there and bring him out in the open when the need arises, but that means I will have to reveal myself to him, which I am not ready to do yet, so it will have to sit for some time," he explained. Dumbledore did not like the idea at all, especially because of his knowledge about the Horcruxes. "I do not think that is wise, Harry," he advised. Harry held up his hands to placate the man. "Professor, I will only do it if necessary before I know I can finish him," he said coyly, tapping where his scar used to be. Dumbledore was again shocked at the insinuation the young man was making. Did he know? If he did, then he was much more prepared than the headmaster had thought. "You know," the old man asked in an uncharacteristic, dumbfounded way. "There are things I cannot talk about as yet, Professor," Harry responded. "But if you were to run a scan on me, I'm sure you would find no remainder of Tom Riddle there," he offered confidently. Dumbledore was still confused, but hoped Harry would tell him or ask for help if he needed it. "May I?" he asked, withdrawing his wand. At Harry's nod, he ran the diagnostic charms and was very surprised by the readings. He was overjoyed for the young man and had to swallow back some of the emotion he was feeling at his relief. "It appears you are right," he confirmed, with his eyes twinkling once again. "You have gone through some very drastic changes, I must say," he concluded. "All necessary, sir," Harry replied a little sadly. "Alas, yes," Dumbledore concurred. "I would like to offer you my assistance, though, Harry," he continued seriously. "If there is anything I can do to help you, then I shall," he explained meaningfully. "Thank you, sir," Harry responded with a smile. "For now, just keep doing what you are, and when I need you, I will call on you," he promised. Dumbledore returned the smile gratefully. He had expected this conversation to be much more difficult than it had been. He had expected Harry to be furious with him and maybe even curse him, something he would not like to face with the Harry in front of him. "There is one thing that is bothering me, Professor," Harry exclaimed with a slight frown. "What is that, Harry?" Dumbledore asked. "You seem to accept that I have killed men and will kill more quite readily," Harry answered, wanting to understand the blasé view the headmaster seemed to have on him taking lives. Dumbledore sighed at the question before he answered. "It is one of the unfortunate necessities of war, Harry," he said tiredly. "Contrary to popular belief, I do not believe that redemption is attainable for everyone," he continued. "I do not condone killing in any way, but alas, I know for you and many other good men, women and children to survive, then it has to be done," he said sadly. "I don't enjoy it, sir," Harry responded. "You said in my second year that I and Riddle were similar, but I don't enjoy killing the way he does," he added, shaking his head. "I am glad to hear it," the old man replied, looking relieved. "It is unfortunate that you find yourself in this position, Harry, one that I once found myself in," he continued with another sigh. "You and Grindelwald," Harry stated. "Yes, Gellert and myself," he said with sadness. "You see, Harry, I am not like you," he elaborated. "I am not a born fighter. My talents lie within transfiguration and alchemy. Yes, I excelled in all my subjects, but I am not a warrior. I do not have the mentality for it," he added. "When Gellert became the treat that he did, the Wizarding World looked to me to solve the problem, because I was well known for my power and prowess with a wand, but I was not known for my fighting ability. It was with deep reluctance that I confronted Gellert that day, and not a day goes by that I do not regret it," he admitted. "You see, Harry, there was a time that Gellert and I were friends. We were young and foolishly idealistic, something I grew out of and something he did not," he continued. Harry was surprised by the admission, but did not interrupt the man, keen to hear what he was saying. "I never intended to kill him, and it was an unfortunate accident on my part that caused his death. In the heat of the moment, I raised a deflection shield and the curse struck and killed him." He continued again, shaking his head and looking sad. "I had hoped that I could negotiate with him and at worst apprehend him and bring an end to his tyranny that way. Again, a mistake on my part. Gellert had no intention of listening to me or being stopped, and events unfolded the way they did." He finished with clear remorse. "But it all worked out for the best in the end," Harry pointed out. "For the Wizarding World, yes. But for me, it did not," Dumbledore retorted with a hint of bitterness in his voice. "I have to live with the guilt of taking a life of a man who was once a friend, Harry, and that is something I am not equipped to do," he explained. "What have you observed about the people of the Wizarding World, Harry?" he asked, unexpectedly. In truth, Harry had not spent much time in the Wizarding World, aside from his time at Hogwarts, and with Arcturus, so he was stumped by the question. "I know it can be very fickle," he replied, remembering all the times people had turned their backs on him. Dumbledore nodded. "That is one part of it," he agreed. "Let me explain a few things to you," he continued thoughtfully. Harry watched as Dumbledore was clearly thinking of the best way to explain his thoughts. "The Wizarding World consists mainly of people who are spectators. There are very few men of action," he began. "I never wanted the titles that I have. I simply wanted to teach and have a peaceful life amongst my books and my further studies," he explained further. "After that fateful day with Gellert, that was not to be," he elaborated sadly. "The Wizarding World put me on a pedestal and hailed me as a hero. Since that day, they have looked to me to solve their problems for them, and whenever I couldn't, they became spiteful towards me. As you can see from the articles in the Prophets these past months," he pointed out as an example, They need their hero, Harry. They do not function without someone to take to the helm and guide them. We live amongst sheep with very few shepherds to guide the flock. You understand?" he asked. At Harry's nod, he continued. "That has been my life, Harry, guiding them and allowing them to watch me carry the burdens on their behalf, and I fear that it will be you in that position once you have dealt with Tom," he said, shaking his head. "I deluded myself into believing that if I turned down the position of minister, then I was only offering my aid. But as you can see, the type of people who become minister are not fit for the position, and I have always been sought out by whoever was in office to help them far beyond that of an advisory role," he said, sounding a little bitter again. "You've seen for yourself that I am not infallible, Harry, and the mistakes I make may be far fewer than the average person, but they are undoubtedly much more severe. I am telling you this so you can be prepared for what is waiting for you," he concluded. Harry listened to what the old man said and had no reason to doubt him at all. He was at first by the bitter tone of the headmaster's voice, but found he felt quite sorry for the man. Harry had always wondered how he had ended up in the position he was, and always assumed he had sought out the power and chided himself for how wrong he had been in his assumptions. "My entire point was," Dumbledore cut into Harry's thoughts, "that I was pressured to act, and the pressure led to the position I find myself in now, and if that is not what you want, then you need to not allow yourself to be pressured, and be stronger than I ever have been," he explained to the young man. Harry stood and put a reassuring hand on the old man's shoulder. "I think the fact that you have continued despite the way you feel makes you much stronger than you give yourself credit for, Professor," Harry said. "You are only human, after all, and I myself am guilty of putting you on that pedestal," he admitted. "Thank you, Harry," Dumbledore replied with genuine gratitude. "Seeing the man you have become really makes it feel worth it," he replied tiredly, but with a smile. Harry nodded at the headmaster. "You do leave behind quite the legacy, though, sir, and you should be very proud of your achievements," he suggested. "There are not many wizards like yourself, and I respect you now more than I ever have for your honesty and continual perseverance," he continued, bowing his head in respect. The headmaster was back to full twinkle again, and Harry suspected that some of the twinkle he was seeing was in fact emotion. The older man could not conceal. "That means more to me than any award I have been given," he replied genuinely. "I had planned on inquiring where it was you had been staying, but seeing the man you are becoming has made me reconsider that, knowing it is clearly the best place for you. But please remember there is always a place here for you, especially after you place those wards around your relatives," he said amusedly. "Thank you, sir," Harry replied. "It is the best place for me, and I am as safe as I ever have been," he explained, putting the headmaster at ease. "I do believe there are a few people waiting to talk to me, though," Harry added. "You are right, Harry," Dumbledore replied. "We should not keep them waiting any longer," he concluded. Harry turned to leave them, but felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see the headmaster looking at him appraisingly. "Thank you, Harry, for bringing a much-needed smile to an old man," he said gratefully. "I only gave you the truth, sir. The smile is because you allowed it," Harry replied with a grin which caused the old man to chuckle. "Then never stop pointing out the truth, Harry," he advised happily with another chuckle. The duo made their way back to the kitchen, which was still full of people, clearly waiting for the conclusion of their discussion. Harry took a seat next to Sirius, who gave him a nod, and Dumbledore resumed his place at the head of the table. "Did you discuss what you needed to?" Minerva asked Dumbledore after he was seated. "We did indeed, and now we have a few things to discuss," he replied seriously. "Firstly, there will be no more need for guard duty," he began, to the confusion of those assembled. "But you said it was the most important thing we could do," Kingsley cut in. "I did," Dumbledore agreed, raising his hands to placate the group. "But after discussing it with Harry, that is no longer the case, as he is taking responsibility for the item in question," he explained. "And we can trust him to take care of it?" Snape asked disbelievingly. "Harry has a plan, and though I am not a fan of it, I trust him implicitly," he answered, the potions master, who simply sneered. "Are you going to tell us what the item is now?" Tonks asked the headmaster, shooting a glance at Harry, who looked at Dumbledore and nodded his approval. "I will explain what it is as Harry has given me permission, but there is something I must ask of all of you first," he spoke firmly. And that would be, Minerva asked with a raised eyebrow. Dumbledore sighed. On behalf of Harry, first must ask that none of you attempt to engage the Dark Lord. He instructed the group, to which some looked relieved, and others mutinous. So Potter wants all the glory. Snape sneered. No, Snape, it is not about glory, Harry replied before Dumbledore could. It is about vengeance, he added coldly. That bastard will fall to my wand, he finished in a no-nonsense tone. You can't be serious, Minerva cut in. Albus, you can't allow him to face that monster, she pleaded. I'm afraid it is out of my hands, Dumbledore replied sadly. And I'm sure Snape here has told you exactly about the monster I have become, haven't you, Snape? Harry asked the man scathingly. Severus has not said a word since you left, Molly explained. Oh well, that makes a change. It's not like Snape to miss an opportunity to belittle me. What's wrong, Snape? Left your bowls in your master's handbag, Harry asked sarcastically, causing Sirius to laugh with glee. Harry, Dumbledore warned firmly. It is out of my hands because of the item in question that we have been guarding, he continued. It is a prophecy pertaining to Harry and the Dark Lord, he explained ruefully. And it says that only Harry can kill him? Sirius asked with concern in his voice. I will not divulge the content of it, as even Harry does not wish to know the specifics. Dumbledore answered, but I have every confidence that he will be successful, he finished firmly, raising his hand to silence any protest. So we have to rely on a boy to finish this war? Elphias Dughouse asked in bewilderment. My godson is more of a man than any of you at this table, and has dealt with more than any of us, Sirius retorted angrily. If there is anyone who disagrees with that, then take it up with him yourself. He is sat right there, he challenged, pointing to Harry. No one at the table said a word, but a few murmurs could be heard. Are you going to at least train him? Doge asked Dumbledore, but it was Snape who replied. Training? He asked sarcastically. He should be locked up for what he did to those men, he answered heatedly, to which Harry laughed. Yes, Snape, because you are the moral compass I should look to. Clearly you saw the rat's memory, Harry spat. So you saw what they were doing to those women. I would do the same again in a heartbeat without hesitating, he finished dangerously. What the hell did the lad do to them? Moody growled, clearly curious as to what Potter was capable of. Ask him, Snape spat angrily, pointing to Harry, who just shrugged. Can I see? Moody asked Harry, who just shrugged again. Sirius retrieved the pensieve and Harry placed the memory in it. I warn you, it's not pretty, he said to the gathered group, who all, minus Snape and Dumbledore, had gathered around. They emerged from the pensieve 10 minutes later with mixed reactions. Well done, Potter, Moody praised. They got what they deserved, he said proudly. Harry, how could you do that? Mrs. Weasley asked, clearly in shock. Where did you learn such dark magic? She questioned further. That is my family magic, Harry responded a little coldly, causing the redhead to pale. Although I don't agree with your methods, you fought well, Potter, McGonagall added her thoughts. Where did you learn parcel magic? She asked. I picked up a few books, Harry answered nonchalantly. Yes, well fought, Kingsley praised, a little pale. And I am sorry for drawing my wand on you earlier, he added as an afterthought. It is okay. Kingsley Shacklebolt, the dark-skinned Auror, cut in, extending his hand, to which Harry accepted. No harm done, Harry replied to the man. What followed was Harry being introduced to the rest of the group, some taking his hand gladly, others with a little hesitation. And that brings me back to you, Snape, Harry addressed, when he came to the potions master. I'll have your vow of silence now, so you don't go telling little tales to your master, he insisted. And if I refuse, Snape sneered in response, then I will have to silence you where you stand. Harry replied coldly, leaving no doubt that he would do as he just said. The entire room watched with bated breath at the standoff between the two, waiting for either one to make a move. It was Dumbledore that ended the tense situation. Severus, please give your vow, he instructed the clearly reluctant man. Snape looked as though he wanted to argue, but eventually complied without resistance. Harry nodded at the vow he received, satisfied that Snape could not say a word. Snape made to leave when he was stopped by the boy with a firm hand on his chest. Be careful if you're out on any raids with your friends, Snape, Harry warned. If you are in a mask or wear the mark, then you are the enemy to me, and I will treat you the same way I did them," he said, pointing to the pensieve. Snape pushed past Harry and left as quickly as he could, not uttering a word. It was soon after that the meeting broke up, and after Harry had promised he would visit Sirius more often, he left to get some much-needed rest. He knew Arcturus would be asleep by now, so would explain what happened to the man at breakfast before they would leave for Harry to begin his Odolus break. Harry and Arcturus arrived at the Ministry of Magic, disguised suitably, of course. They made their way to the wizard at the front desk to check in, something that was an unavoidable aspect of gaining entry into the main building. They both handed over their wands, and the clerk gave them a very critical look before handing them back. "Very unusual wands you both have there," he stated, looking between the two. Arcturus simply scowled at the man and walked past, ushering for Harry to follow. It was Harry's first trip to the ministry, and he was very disappointed in what he saw. The first thing that bothered him was the golden statue in the atrium that depicted a wizard and witch being looked upon in adoration by various creatures, something Harry knew to be a complete fabrication. The other thing was how easy it seemed to breach the security here. It was almost non-existent, save for the desk clerk they had just left behind. The building itself looked very boring, and Harry had at least expected some kind of magnificent display of magic or something akin to it, but found it was mainly a collection of offices filled with paper pusher, completing very menial tasks. Instead of focusing on the elevator he was currently in, that seemed to move in all possible directions, he began mentally preparing himself for the day. His discussion with Arcturus this morning at breakfast had gone as he had expected it would, with the older man simply advising that he take a wait-and-see approach when it came to the order. The man was clearly not impressed with what he had heard. He had the same stance as Harry when it came to divination and prophecies, and agreed with Harry that if the one pertaining to him and Voldemort did not allude to a definite victim, then it was next to useless for the boy to know, and may steer him in a way that would make him less flexible in his approach to dealing with the idiot Dark Lord. Other than discussing those two things mainly, Arcturus spent much of the morning cursing and insulting Dumbledore, something that Harry largely ignored. They arrived at the Department of Education and Examinations, and Arcturus stopped Harry when they got to the door belonged to Madame Marchbanks. "Now remember what I said, Potter," he spoke just above a whisper. "Hold nothing back and show them what you are made of," he instructed firmly. At Harry's nod, the two entered what Harry thought would be an office, but found it to be a reasonably large hall, with a single desk placed in the centre. At the front of the room were two people. One Harry assumed was Madame Marchbanks herself, and the other was a short and very ancient-looking wizard, who looked as though he was about to keel over from his clearly advanced years. The duo approached the front of the room where the two elder people were and waited to be acknowledged. "I am glad to see that you made it on time," Marchbanks said approvingly. "I am Madame Marchbanks, and I will be conducting the theory side to your examinations. And this," she said, gesturing to her colleague, "is Professor Tofty, who will administer the practicals," she explained. "May I have a word with you, sir?" she questioned Arcturus, who agreed and led her some distance away from the other two individuals. "This is most unusual, Arcturus," the woman said in a heated whisper. "Can we at least be open about this with Edward?" she asked, indicating the ancient wizard. "I have worked with the man for over 90 years, and I trust him completely," she explained. "Will he give a vow?" Arcturus asked neutrally. "Yes, I am sure he will," the lady replied confidently. "Very well. If he gives the vow, then I do not see an issue, if it is just the two of you carrying out the exams," he answered, a little irritably. "Thank you. It will save the problems that this cloak-and-dagger approach will cause," she sighed gratefully. The two then returned to the front of the room where Harry and Professor Tofty were waiting for them. "Edward, there is something you should be aware of," Madame Marchbanks began, "but it will require a vow of silence on your part, and I promise it will in no way put you in any kind of predicament," she added, seeing the confusion on her colleague's face. "That is certainly intriguing, Griselda," he said, looking amused. "Do you feel the information is worth the vow?" he asked with a raised eyebrow. "I do," she answered immediately. The shorter and older-looking wizard seemed to ponder it a moment before he removed his wand. I, Edward Octavius Tofty, give a vow of silence on my life and magic to not reveal anything discussed in the room with the current people in attendance. Without express permission, so mote it be, he finished, looking at the 3 other people in the room. Thank you, Edward, Marchbanks sighed in relief. May I introduce you to Baron Arcturus Black and Harry Potter, she said, gesturing to the men. Professor Tofty's eyebrows rose in surprise, but the look of amusement never left him. Definitely worth it, he mumbled to himself quietly. It has been some years since I have been surprised in such a way, he added, chuckling. By now, Harry had removed the glamours he had worn, and Professor Tofty looked at him speculatively. This should be a very interesting few days indeed, he surmised, looking 20 years younger at least. I assume because you are here and not at school, then there is some truth in the rumours about a certain returning Dark Lord, he stated to Harry. He is back, Harry replied honestly. Say no more, Tofty intoned, clearly not surprised. I have seen many strange and wondrous things in this world, Mr. Potter, and also some truly awful things. A man returning seemingly from the dead offers little surprise in comparison, he explained to the younger man. Now, Griselda, if you will, he gestured, for his companion to continue her explanation of the exams. As I was saying, Madame Marchbanks began. I will be in charge of the theory portion of the exams, and Professor Tofty will take over, and you will complete the practical with him, she explained. What subjects are you planning on taking? She questioned. Harry removed a piece of parchment from within the robes he was wearing today and handed it to the woman, who began to read. Examination choices: defense against the dark arts, charms, transfiguration, potions, care of magical creatures, ancient runes, arithmancy, history of magic, herbology, astronomy, muggle studies, everything except for divination, she said in surprise. That is a very demanding schedule, she explained. You can also gain an extra OWL in dueling if you so wish, she asked, to which Harry immediately agreed to. I will inform the Aura department, and they will send someone down when required, she continued. Well, without further ado, I suggest we begin, she added. Today you will complete potions, transfiguration, ancient runes, and arithmancy, she informed him, marking off the subjects she mentioned. Please take a seat, and we will begin. Break. Harry was mentally drained. The exams themselves had not been difficult, but the sheer amount of reading and writing he had done was tiring. He knew he had done well on the theory side of things, having answered all the questions, confident in his answers, and even added his own observations and extra information where he could. His practical potion exam had gone surprisingly well, considering it was the subject he spent the least amount of time on. He had to brew the draught of peace, which was fairly simple, and he was grateful that he hadn't been given something overly difficult. He was currently waiting for Professor Tofty to begin his practical for transfiguration. Okay, Mr. Potter, I would you to transfigure this hedgehog into a pincushion, he instructed, indicating the hedgehog on the desk. Harry breathed and envisioned what he wanted the hedgehog to become. With a flick of his wand, the animal turned into a deep crimson pincushion with an intricate gold pattern. Professor Tofty raised his eyebrows, clearly impressed. Non-verbal magic already, Mr. Potter. That is impressive, he praised. Now I would like you turn this water into vinegar, he instructed, to which Harry complied immediately. Very good, Tofty responded with a frown. Now finally I would like to demonstrate the most advanced form of transfiguration you can complete, he explained, looking amused and curious at the same time. Harry thought for a moment and was suddenly struck with an idea. He concentrated on what he wanted and began channeling his power delicately as not to overdo it on this intricate piece of magic. On the desk now sat a perfectly conjured but scaled-down replica of Hogwarts, made entirely of marble. That is very impressive indeed, Mr. Potter. Tofty praised in awe. You seem to have inherited your father's talent for transfiguration, he added approvingly. That completes your examinations for today. I will see you tomorrow, he said, dismissing the young man. Harry breathed a sigh of relief and made his way to the exit to head home for the day. He was tired, but he still had training to complete, something he certainly would not be neglecting despite the high demand of the exams. Break. The rest of the week continued in a similar fashion for Harry. He would arrive at the ministry early and first complete the theoretical portion of the exams in the morning and then the practical in the afternoon if it was required. He found the theory work very easy and answered all the questions without difficulty. But it seemed that Professor Tofty, upon seeing how advanced he was with the practical aspect of magic, took it upon himself to put the teen through his paces. In his defense practical, the elder professor had Harry performing counter curses that he knew was beyond ordinary wizard level and silent when possible. In his charms exam, the man took the same approach, having Harry perform everything silently, which he managed to do with comparative ease. It was when Tofty asked if there was anything he would like to demonstrate for extra credit that truly impressed the professor. Harry easily produced a corporeal Patronus, something the older man had never seen from a teenager before. When Harry revealed that he could perform the Fidelius charm, the wizened wizard almost fainted on the spot. He instructed Harry to place the charm on the room, making him the secret keeper and to successfully remove it, which in itself was very complex magic. When Harry had completed as he was instructed, the man simply shook his head in disbelief. Professor Tofty was having the most fun he had had in years being an examiner. It was now the final day, and Harry had completed all of the required exams and was waiting to be tested on his dueling, the thing he was most confident in. Although he would only be able to use select spells from his family magic, he was sure that he would perform admirably and defeat whoever was placed in front of him. "Well, Mr. Potter," Tofty said with excitement, "considering your performance this week, Madame Marchbanks has insisted that we bring in a specialist for your dueling examination," he explained with glee. Harry just nodded and readied himself for what was to come. He was not nervous, knowing that it was very unlikely that Voldemort was going to walk through the door and help him with his academics. He smiled at the amusing thought, applied his glamours and waited. A few minutes passed before the door opened, revealing a very curious-looking Mad-Eye Moody, who completely ignored Harry and approached the two examiners. "This better be worth my time," he growled at them, clearly annoyed. "Believe me, Alastair, it will be," Tofty replied, shaking in his excitement. Moody grunted in reply. "Where is my victim?" he asked, with a cruel smile that truly completed his sinister look as it manipulated the scars on his face to become more jagged and pronounced. Tofty simply smiled and pointed behind Moody, who allowed his magical eye to turn and view the young man through the back of his head. Moody followed his eye soon after and looked at the young man critically. When he spotted the wand in the young man's hand, he smirked in recognition and barked out a gravelly laugh. "Oh, I was hoping I would get to duel you, Potter," he growled, clearly looking forward to the fight. "It has been a very long time since I have had a good battle," he explained. The two examiners looked confused but remained silent, wanting to see how this would play out between the young man and the very respected ex-Auror. "My grandfather wrote about you in some of his journals, Senior Auror Moody," Harry said casually, causing the man to raise an eyebrow. "He said you were a hell of a fighter, but shite at dodging and shielding, and from the amount of scars and injuries you have, I guess he was right," he added. Moody looked at the teen in front of him critically and suddenly roared in laughter. He would be right, lad," he replied once he had composed himself. "A few of these I got from him personally," he said in remembrance. "He was a great man and a hard bastard, your grandfather," he finished knowingly. "When you are ready, gentlemen," Madame Marchbanks cut in impatiently. "Aye, we best get started then." Moody agreed, immediately launching a bludgeoning hex at Harry, who dodged it with ease. The two examiners watched in complete awe as the former Auror and the young man competed in a duel that neither had ever seen the likes of. It was immediately clear that Potter was both faster and considerably more powerful than Moody, but the Auror's experience certainly made up for it. They watched as the two combatants traded all manner of spells and used various types of magic in attempt to get the upper hand, and saw things that neither had ever seen. It was Potter that eventually seized the advantage of his youth and caught the ex-Auror with a perfectly timed and placed bonebreaker to the hand that caused the Auror to drop his wand, which the younger man immediately summoned. Both men were sweating profusely, and their breathing was very labored. They had both performed to the best of their ability, and both examiners knew they had just witnessed something very special. Harry approached Moody and bowed respectfully to the man before handing back his wand. "Thank you, sir," he said with genuine gratitude, and offered the grizzled man his hand, who accepted. "That was a hell of a fight," Moody declared breathlessly. "I don't feel any shame losing to you, Potter. You beat me fair, lad," he admitted. "Well, any time you want to do it again, I'd be happy to," Harry responded with a smile. "Aye, lad, so would I," he replied with a grin. "I'd be happy to fight side by side with you when the time comes. Albus was right about you. This is your fight. Just let me a part of it," he requested of the younger man, who nodded in response. "That was certainly spectacular." Tofty broke in. He shook his head and continued. "Well, that concludes your final exam, Mr. Potter. You are free to go. You will receive your results in due course," he explained. Harry shook hands with the three people in the room. He was grateful that the exams were over, and even more grateful for the experience of dueling a man the caliber of Moody. Harry was exhausted, and he wasn't ashamed to admit it. Moody was a very powerful wizard, and was a very cunning and creative fighter. Harry realized, although he won, he still had quite a distance to go before he would be ready. He had picked up many tips from the older man and knew it would be beneficial to him to include them in his own fighting style. He still had work to do and lots of new things to work on. For now, though, he was glad the exams were over and felt that he deserved a treat. He decided that he was going to get some ice cream before heading home, remembering how fond he was of Mr. Fortescue and his wonderful desserts. Harry exited the ministry and apparated to Diagon Alley to satisfy his craving for something sweet and to catch his breath. Harry appeared in the alley and immediately went to the ice cream parlor, where he ordered a combination of raspberry and chocolate topped with nuts. He sat outside the shop for around an hour, slowly eating his treat, and simply watched the hustle and bustle of the alley as the people went about their business. He looked on a little enviously at the apparent normality of their lives and couldn't help but wish he was one of those people where the only worry he had was going to work or school and providing and shopping for a family. He paid for his ice cream and left feeling somewhat dejected at the difficulties he faced in his life and the unfairness of it. He was walking past a small apothecary when he heard a loud crash coming from within. He glanced in the window and saw that a rather large man was holding the female worker by the front of her robes and had his wand pointed at her throat. The woman was clearly terrified. Harry immediately felt his anger boil, but composed himself and entered the shop casually. "Get lost, kid," the man growled. "We are discussing business," he added in a threatening tone. Harry looked at the woman, who seemed to be begging him to leave with her eyes. She was a very beautiful woman indeed. She had long blonde hair and blue eyes, with a petite figure that was curvy in all the right places. Harry ignored the pleading look and turned his gaze towards the man. It was then he noticed a not-so-subtle section of a black tattoo protruding from his left sleeve, which had ridden up his arm. "I have my own business to discuss," he replied calmly, "so if you wouldn't mind releasing this lady and leaving, it would be much appreciated," he suggested. The man turned and looked at the clearly teenage boy and shook his head. "You have no idea who you are messing with, kid," he warned dangerously. "Oh, I know exactly who I am messing with," Harry replied coldly, nodding towards the exposed black ink on the man's arm. At Harry's observation, the man turned his wand towards him, but before he could even aim the wand, Harry, as fast as lightning, had released his and launched a bludgeoning hex at the man, hitting him in the face and sending him flying into a display of potions ingredients. The woman screamed and threw herself to the floor in an attempt to avoid any curses exchanged between the two. She needn't have bothered. The man was clearly unconscious and would not be fighting back. "Are you okay, ma'am?" Harry asked, helping the woman to her feet. I think so," she replied, checking herself over. "Thank you," she said gratefully. Harry acknowledged her gratitude and approached the man who was heaped on the floor. He raised his left sleeve to confirm his suspicions, causing the woman to let out a stifled scream. "Oh no, this can't be happening," she sighed, beginning to breathe heavily. "Ma'am, it's okay, I can fix it," Harry explained, attempting to calm the woman, and began going to work on the man. In less than 2 minutes, Harry had finished and placed a conjured ice cube on the body that caused the man to disappear. "What did you do?" the woman asked suspiciously. I modified his memory so he will think he had gotten drunk and can't remember anything, Harry explained. He won't remember you, me, or even the shop, he explained further. The woman was clearly taken aback at the high-level magic the young man had just performed. I am sorry about the mess, Harry said sheepishly, breaking her from her thoughts. Here, he added, handing over a bag of galleons. This should more than cover the cost. The woman at first refused to take the gold until Harry insisted that she did. She was confused by the young man in front of her. Not only had he saved her, but he had dealt with any problem that could come from the situation. Thank you, young man, she spoke again gratefully. This is my husband's shop, and he's away buying more ingredients. I work at the ministry usually, she explained. Well, I suggest that you close until your husband returns, Harry said. Times are getting darker by the day, and it will only get worse, he added seriously. You saw the mark on his arm? He questioned. At the woman's nod, he continued. Remember, there is always some truth in rumors. Harry confirmed with a nod. So he is back then? She asked, clearly concerned. Undoubtedly, Harry replied darkly. But won't he come for you if he finds out? She asked in a panic. I very much doubt he will find out, and even if he does, it doesn't matter, Harry explained with a dark chuckle. You're not concerned about him coming after you? She questioned disbelievingly. Ma'am, he should be concerned about me coming after him, Harry replied coldly and disappeared silently, leaving behind a very confused but grateful Ophelia Greengrass in his wake. Ophelia did as had been instructed by the young man and closed the shop. She headed home, lost in thought about what had happened, and concluded that the day had been very strange. She had, of course, heard the rumors and had been more vigilant, but she had not expected to be attacked in broad daylight in a shop her husband had owned for many years. The young man that rescued her was clearly still a teenager. Of that she was sure, so why was he not at school? He was very nondescript, also, and that baffled her. He looked completely average. Too average. If truth be told. Brown hair and blue eyes and no markings whatsoever that would make him stand out in a crowd. The only defining feature about the young man was the unusual wand he carried. White wood and black crystal was not a mix she had ever come across, and she knew by the wand and the magic she witnessed alone that he was not the average wizard his appearance alluded to. Ophelia Greengrass could not be sure, but she was under the impression that she had just met someone very significant, particularly the way he showed no fear in regards to you-know-who. He was either very stupid and deluded, or he was very brave and very capable. This was something she needed to discuss with her husband when he returned, and he would not be a happy man learning about the events of the day. It was now April, and the cold weather that had been sweeping across Britain for the past several months had started to lift and give way to the spring. However, the brightening and warmth of the weather was not reflected within the castle at Hogwarts. Since returning from the Christmas holidays, the students had been subject to even more strict and stringent measures, making it near impossible for them to hold any further meetings, and even when they managed to come together as a group, it wasn't long before they were broken up. Today was different, though. After the news of the mass breakout from Azkaban, the members of the group knew they had to meet. It was imperative. After managing to create a big enough distraction in the Great Hall in the form of a very large loose bunch of pixies, provided by Luna, the students had managed to secure a classroom on the 6th floor to have a much-needed meeting to discuss the events of the past few months. It's really happening, isn't it? Lavender Brown spoke once they were all present. It's been happening for months, Daphne explained. A few shops have closed in the alley and are only operating an hour order service. My mum was attacked by a Death Eater in January while my dad was away, she added, clearly still upset by what had happened. There was a collective gasp from the rest of the students.
Oh my God, is she okay? What happened?
Hermione questioned with concern. She got lucky, Daphne began. She said that some young guy saved her and kicked the Death Eater's ass, she added, with a grin. She said that he modified his memory when he was out cold and put a portkey on him, and he even paid for the damage in the shop, she finished, frowning thoughtfully. He must be really brave to take on a Death Eater, Parvati Patel chimed in. Or a complete idiot, Ron added. Hermione frowned at the red head. Ever since they had returned, he had been even more bitter and lazy. She thought that after his father was attacked, he would buck up his ideas and put more effort into his work, but he instead did the opposite, and often found himself in trouble with the professors for producing such poor work. "Did she say who he was?" she asked the blonde Slytherin. "She didn't get his name," Daphne explained, shaking her head. "She said he looked average, but she thinks he was wearing a glamour, and the only unusual thing about him was his wand." She finished shrugging. "His wand?" Neville questioned. "Yes, she said it was a white wood and black crystal wand. They were woven together," she replied. "He must have some very strange cause for it to be made that way," Hermione mused thoughtfully. "How so?" Neville asked. "Well, usually a wand is one wood with one or two cores that complement each other," she began her explanation. "Crystals are usually used only as focus points. Different crystals have different purposes," she added. "If his wand is a mixture of both, then that means he has cores that won't bind or will negate each other. He must be a very unusual wizard for that to happen, though," she concluded with a shake of her head. "How do you know that?" Daphne asked in surprise at the knowledge the Gryffindor bookworm had. "I asked Mr. Ollivander about the different types of wands, and he told me that wands like that are almost unheard of," she explained. The rest of the students just shook their heads at the bushy-haired girl. "Has anyone else heard anything?" Ginny asked, expectantly. When no one spoke, Hermione decided it was probably best they end the meeting so they didn't get caught. "Are we going to train soon?" Luna asked hopefully. "It's impossible to do it with Filch, the Toad and her squad around," Tracy cut in. "We just have to practice on our own while we can for now," Hermione said a little sadly, "and just hope we've done enough to pass our OWLs," she added. "What is Harry going to do about his OWLs? He's missed the whole year," Neville asked. "If he is still alive, of course," he added sheepishly. "I think if Potter is still alive, then OWLs are the least of his worries." Longbottom, Daphne sighed exasperatedly. "Has anyone even heard from him? It's almost been a year now," she asked irritably. "Not a word," Hermione said sadly. "He's probably done a runner," Ron spat bitterly. "He has not run Weasley," Neville retorted angrily. The rest of the group looked at them, clearly seeing that something had happened or something was not being shared. "What is it you know, Longbottom?" Daphne asked with a raised eyebrow. Neville looked like a rabbit caught in headlights and looked at Hermione, clearly wanting her help. Hermione shrugged at him. "You haven't heard from him since, have you?" she asked the very nervous-looking boy, who shook his head in reply. "Then I guess it doesn't matter if you say," Hermione shrugged again. "What the hell is it, Longbottom? Spit it out or I will hex you," Daphne threatened, drawing her wand. Neville huffed exasperatedly and held his hands up in defeat. "I sent Harry a birthday present last year, and he replied," Neville explained. "And you didn't think to tell us," Tracy cut in angrily. "When is his birthday?" she asked, clearly annoyed. "I promised I wouldn't," Neville retorted firmly. "July 31st, a day after mine," he sighed. "So you," Daphne began prodding the Gryffindor. "Hear from him a month after he disappeared and didn't tell us all year?" she asked, dangerously. "He asked me not to tell anyone," Neville replied, now getting annoyed himself. "But he wouldn't run away. I'm not that close to him, but I know he's not like that. When have any of you known Harry to quit?" he asked the group heatedly. "He never quit in second year when you all thought he was the heir of Slytherin and was attacking us. He didn't quit when the Dementors were here and they got to him worse than anyone else, and he didn't give up when you all thought he put his name in the Goblet of Fire and he was pretty much segregated by everyone for months." He finished feeling very angry. The rest of the students looked embarrassed by the way they had treated Potter. "And even if he did run from it all, would any of you really blame him? It's not like the wizarding world has been good to him. Hell, his whole life has been a shitstorm," he finished, exiting the room and slamming the door as he left. "Who knew Neville had that in him?" Lavender asked in shock. Suitably cowed, the rest of the group departed for their own dormitories. They were glad they got the chance to discuss at least a few things of importance, even if it did end with them being reprimanded by Longbottom. Break. The mood of Lord Voldemort had not improved over the last few months. Firstly, Lucius and Severus had failed in their investigation to identify the young man who had thwarted Peter's attempt at capturing the wife of Jean Delacour. Secondly, the Death Eaters he had had under his command had been nothing but incompetent, having failed to carry out the most simple of orders. One of the reasons he found himself liberating his more loyal and useful followers much sooner than he had originally planned. The Dark Lord was nothing if not meticulous in his planning, and he had spent many years as a younger man finding a way to secure his place in this world in the form of his Horcruxes, something exceedingly difficult to create. Being the paranoid man he was, he had been to check on the ones that he could currently access and found himself in an uncontrollable rage from what he had discovered. Discovering that Regulus had betrayed him had surprised him, but he had killed the man many years ago for his actions. He discovered that the ring belonging to his paternal grandfather had also gone missing, and that whoever took it had left no trace of themselves behind. He concluded it must have been a very gifted wizard to pull off a feat like this. Upon questioning Lucius about the diary he had placed in his care, the man went to pieces and had to be most severely punished for his transgression against his master. He was very fortunate that he was a very useful asset, or he would most certainly have found himself dead. The Dark Lord suspected that the man had wished for death during the course of his punishment. This led to him making the decision to free his followers prematurely and risk coming out in the open. He needed to be sure of his other items. Bellatrix had one in her vault at his request, and her connection to the Black family and Regulus had him worried for the welfare of the cup. Thus, this was the main reason for acting as he had. He also required the services of the Dementors to offer a distraction while Peter retrieved the final one he had placed at Hogwarts. Usually he would simply ask Severus to retrieve it, but with the man's knowledge of the dark arts, it was very likely that he would recognize what it was, and he wanted to protect his secret as best he could and keep it to himself unless it became entirely necessary. He knew Peter could get into the castle as he had spent many years there undetected in his rat form, and he knew he was not versed enough in magic to recognize what it was he was retrieving. The last one of his creations was with him always in the form of his familiar. He knew it had been a risk creating one from a live vessel, but he found upon doing it the snake became much more intelligent and very resistant to magic. Overall, he was content that this one was at least safe. The thing that had him concerned the most was the fact that he knew he wouldn't be able to create any more. The soul is not an infinite source, and he knew from the creation of the last one that it would no longer be a viable option. The pain had been unbearable, and he had been out of sorts for months. Perhaps creating the last one had been a mistake on his part. He was broken from his reverie by the arrival of Bellatrix, who was looking terrible. Azkaban had been terrible to her, and she looked just like an inferi. Her beauty had faded with her years spent in there, and what was left was a shadow of the vibrant woman she used to be. Now she was nothing more than a psychopath, but would certainly be useful in a fight once she was a little healthier. "My lord," she began, falling to her knees in front of her master. "The goblins allowed me entry, as you said they would," she explained. "And what of my item?" the Dark Lord asked impatiently. "My vault was empty, my lord. There was nothing in there," she sputtered, quivering in fear. "The goblins said that the ministry seized the contents," she added, continuing to shake. The Dark Lord growled in annoyance, but was hit by a realization. If the ministry had seized it, then it is likely that all of the contents were simply moved to a larger and much more protected vault of their own. Although that was likely, he still did not want to risk his final one, and knew he needed Peter to be successful in his plan. If he wasn't, then so help the rat, he would die the most painful and humiliating death the Dark Lord could devise. "Very well, Bella," he intoned neutrally. "Go rest and eat. I will have use for you soon enough," he instructed. "Yes, my lord. Thank you," Bellatrix replied, bowing, clearly relieved at the mercy of her master. She left the room, followed shortly by the Dark Lord, who had a discussion with some Dementors to have. Break? Harry Potter was currently sat in Diagon Alley eating ice cream outside of Fleury and Fortescue's, simply watching the crowd. Something he had been doing a lot recently, particularly after the incident in the apothecary a few months ago. He had, in the intervening months, prevented a few other attempts at intimidation and attacks from single Death Eaters, and had recommended that the owners run an owl service, only business for the time being, which they had quickly listened to, having been harshly made aware of the reality of the spreading rumors. He had become adept at disguising himself, but it was something he did not enjoy doing. He did not feel himself in his various disguises. He had come up with something he made sure he changed each time he came here. He had, as he promised himself, both changed and increased his training, incorporating many new aspects to improve himself as much as he could, and as a result, he knew now that he was better than ever, which was a relief to him, particularly after the breakout from Azkaban and the subsequent reporting of the incident in the Daily Prophet. Clearly the minister had prevented any speculation or allusions to the Dark Lord, blaming Sirius for helping the prisoners to escape as he had done it himself before. Both Harry and Arcturus were incensed by the article, and it had taken them both a very long time to calm down. Harry knew that it would have to be sooner rather than later that he would have to bring the Dark Lord out in the open if things continued the way they were, but first and foremost he had to catch the elusive rat to clear his godfather's name. The rat had yet to make any appearance that Harry had been aware of. He had done as he previously had, and spent times in various hovels trying to catch even a whisper of the rat and his whereabouts, but to no avail. He had picked up a few names of Death Eaters and made a mental note of them for future reference, but other than that, these efforts had been fruitless. It seemed that Pettigrew was keeping a low profile, and it infuriated Harry to no end, but he knew he would have to remain patient. He had tasked Dobby with searching for the man also, and much to the elf's disappointment, it had been a dead avenue also. The reason that Harry was here was that he simply needed some fresh air. He and Arcturus had had a heated discussion about the Azkaban escape, and in particular Arcturus's granddaughter, Bellatrix. Arcturus insisted that although she was one of Riddle's top Death Eaters, she was still his family, and he would not allow Harry to kill her if he came across her unless absolutely necessary. Harry had countered the argument by pointing out that she had tortured and murdered innocent people, but Arcturus would not concede. Eventually the argument got so heated that both men were no longer making any sense, and Harry had left, not wanting to upset the man further. Despite the fact that he was a cantankerous old git at the best of times, Harry did care for him deeply and was grateful for what he had done. While sitting here, he had decided that he would respect the man's wishes, but would not hold back if the deranged woman tried to attack him or anyone else. He knew Arcturus would not be entirely happy with his compromise, but he would accept it. Harry had been visiting his godfather more regularly since he met with Dumbledore and the rest of the Order, but had not attended any more meetings with the group, knowing he could trust the old man to contact him with any important information. He had received his eau de Bial results in mid-February, much later than he had expected to. The letter with the results had informed him that there were difficulties in grading his work, as he was clearly capable way beyond the curriculum, and there had been some considerable debating between his two examiners, which had caused the delay. Overall, he was very happy and very proud of what he had achieved, as was Arcturus, who praised him for his efforts and ability in a rare show of visual pride. He assured Harry that his grandparents would be extremely proud of him also. With his results, he had been offered a very rare opportunity, and he was very much looking forward to it when the time was right. Harry continued watching the people in the alley that was definitely much emptier today than it usually was. Hardly surprising considering the outbreak. He would spend the day here until darkness falls, and then he would head to Nocturne Alley and see if any information could be gathered about the rat or even the escape from the notorious prison. Break. Peter Pettigrew had just been dismissed by the Dark Lord, and he was not comfortable with the mission he had been given to redeem himself, but knew he could not refuse his master. He knew he could get in the castle without any problems. It was getting out that worried him. He was aware that as soon as the Dementors attacked, then a full alert would be implemented, and the castle would be locked down. The rat would be alone, something he did not like. The only backup he had would be the distraction of the Dementors, and that made him very nervous. The one thing he was grateful was that the Dark Lord had allowed him to wait until the next Hogsmeade weekend, meaning that the castle would be mostly empty, giving him the only real advantage towards completing the task. He just hoped that it would be enough, and the plan would go off without a hitch. Break. The day that the students of Hogwarts had been waiting for had finally arrived, the last day of term before the Easter holidays. Today was a Hogsmeade day, and the students were grateful at the early reprieve from the tyranny of the Toad and her chosen cronies. Even though they were leaving tomorrow, everyone in the castle who could leave seemed to have opted to do so for a few carefree hours. Hermione, Ron, Neville, and Ginny had decided to go to the village early as none of them had fully packed for the trip home the following day, and they were hoping that with the castle much emptier, they would be able to get a little practical practice in without being disturbed. Thus they were among the first students to leave the castle, hoping to return quickly. They spent their time shopping for sweets in Honeydukes, and at the request of Hermione went to Slug and Jiggers for a top-up on her potion ingredients, knowing that Diagon Alley was not the most desirable place to be at the moment in time. With their shopping complete, they had time for a quick butterbeer in the Three Broomsticks before they headed back to the castle to pack as they had planned. Ron complained loudly that his day in the village was cut short, but even he couldn't wait to get home for a breather and to have some of his mother's home cooking. With their packing complete, they made their way to the sixth-floor classroom they had used for the previous meeting and began practicing the spell work they were not allowed to under normal circumstances, completely unaware of anything that was happening outside of the room they had warded and silenced accordingly. Break. Daphne, Astoria, and Tracy had decided that they would pack before heading to the village, knowing that most of the students would be getting the carriages at the earliest possible opportunity to spend as much time out of the castle as they could. It was around 11:30 by the time they had finished their packing and made their way to the entrance hall to be checked out by Filch, who was clearly in a sour mood. The castle was silent as the trio had expected, as clearly the students had acted as they had predicted. After being jabbed and prodded unnecessarily by the caretaker, they caught a carriage and made their way into the very busy village. So much for it being quieter later, Tracy grumbled agitatedly. I didn't say it would be quieter, Daphne pointed out. I just said it would be better to pack earlier and avoid the rush for the first carriages, she explained to her friend. Let's just be grateful we get to leave. Astoria chimed in. I can't stand Malfoy leering at everyone and strutting around the common room like a peacock. I just want to hex the bastard every time I see him, she said with a cruel smirk. Yes, well, we get 2 weeks away from the ferret. He's been much worse since Potter has been away and not embarrassed him all year, Tracy added in disgust. I wish he would come back even just to put Malfoy in his place. She finished thoughtfully. Draco is just a ponce, Daphne proclaimed. He will get what's coming to him eventually, she concluded. The trio made their way to the Three Broomsticks to get some lunch, as it had taken them a reasonable amount of time to make their way through the crowds. They managed to find a table in the busy pub and ordered their food. When they finished eating, they left the pub and rejoined the crowd in the busy street. What do you need to get? Tracy asked the sisters, trying to avoid being bustled around too much. I need potions ingredients, Astoria replied. I was only planning on getting some sweets and going to Zunko's to get a surprise for our resident fifth-year prefects. Daphne responded, looking mischievous. Tracy shook her head at her friend. She knew Daphne had quite a mean streak, but she had been terrorizing Pansy a lot recently and now seemed to be ready to turn her attention to Malfoy. Well, why don't you do that? And I will go with Tori. I need to get a new cauldron and we can meet you here in half an hour, Tracy suggested. Daphne, knowing that it made no sense for all three of them to try and make their way through the crowds to the different shops, agreed and went on her way. Zunkus was not far from the apothecary, so she went to Honeydukes first, thinking she would catch her friend and sister as they were finishing their shopping. Things were going according to plan. She had gotten her sweets and exited the shop to make her final stop. It was then that things went horribly wrong. She could feel a slight chill in the air and could hear screams coming from the other side of the village. She withdrew her wand and made her way towards the screams, filled with dread. It was then she realized what was happening. Oh shit, she cursed. She had been practicing tirelessly ever since Granger had spoken of the difficulty of it, but she was not ready for this. Break. Arcturus was sat in his office poring over the map he had borrowed from Potter, that his moron of a grandson and his friends had made at school. He was loath to admit it, but it was quite an extraordinary item, and one that he was sure would be able to help him find what he was looking for. He was sure that Riddle had left one of his abominations in the castle. He was cocksure enough to do it, that was for certain. He had waited for today to look over the map after he discovered it would be a Hogsmeade day, and he could look at it without being distracted by the moving dots of the students. He had already discovered that there were many rooms and tunnels around the castle that he had never been aware of, and according to Potter, there were even more. The boy had pointed out that the Chamber of Secrets wasn't marked on the map, so the chances of there being other hidden rooms was quite high. But Arcturus knew that learning as much as he could from the map was a good start, and he could at least garner some idea where it could be hidden. He would have Potter check the chamber when the time was right, and any other room he found of interest on the map. He knew Potter could get in and out of the castle with his cloak and the map undetected, so had already begun to put a plan in place to have him search, but that meant he would need to include the boy on all the details, something he wasn't ready to share yet, unless he was completely sure of a firm location he had confidence in. As he was looking the map over, he noticed an isolated dot located in the shrieking shack that made him stiffen and had him hurrying quickly from the room with a cruel yet triumphant grin on his face. Break. Harry had just finished dressing after his post-workout shower and was preparing to make his way to the alley to see if he could gather anything from listening to the crowds. He was about to begin applying his glamour when his door burst open and Arcturus charged in, clutching the map, looking gleeful. "The rat is at the shrieking shack," he spoke breathlessly, handing the parchment to the teen. Evidently the older man had ran to the room. Harry looked at the map and grinned. He was about to disapparate when a pop sounded, and a frantic Dobby appeared in the room looking very fearful. "Harry Potter, sir, the Dementies are attacking the students, sir," he shouted in a panic. Harry grabbed the elf to calm him and addressed him as quickly and controlled as he could. "Go and tell Dumbledore," he instructed the elf. "Professor Whiskers is already there, Harry Potter, sir," the elf explained. "Professor Whiskers and the other professors is there, sir. But they is too many Dementies," he explained, panicking more. "Get the rat first, Potter," Arcturus said. "Dumbledore can at least hold them off until you or the Aurors get there," he said confidently. Harry nodded and disappeared. Appearing outside the shack, he checked the map and saw that Peter was just inside. Harry disillusioned himself and silenced his feet before entering. Seeing the door opening, that rat squeaked and made a break for the stairs that led to the tunnel that would bring him the base of the Whomping Willow. It did not take long for him to locate the rat who was making his way through the tunnel. Harry saw a glint of silver in the darkness and fired a well-aimed stunner at the traitor, catching the rat on its flank. He summoned the rat and stunned it again, for good measure. "Where were you going, Peter? We have a lot of catching up to do," he spoke to unconscious Vermin with a twisted smile. He quickly remembered the Dementors that were plaguing the village and quickly made his way to help. He exited the shack and walked straight into a scene of complete panic and chaos. The Dementors were spread out and not attacking in a concentrated fashion as they usually would, making it much more difficult to combat the creatures. Harry charged forward and quickly saw a blonde student attempting a Patronus charm that was just not strong enough to fight of the Dementor that had accosted her. He watched in horror as her weak shield fell and the beast approached her. "Expecto Patronum," he said casually, knowing he had to remain calm. His thustral erupted from the end of his wand and galloped audibly into the Dementor, causing it to flee with a loud screech of fury into the air, which his Patronus followed and began flying at every one of the creatures it came to. Harry noticed the girl was about to keel over and apparated to her side and managed to catch the near-unconscious blonde in his arms before she hit the floor. Break. The sheer number of Dementors that were attacking had Albus Dumbledore worried. He was very adept with the Patronus charm, but the way the creatures were scattered made it difficult even for his powerful Phoenix to combat. He had sent word to the Auror office, but they were notoriously slow at responding, so for the time being it was only himself, Minerva and Phoelius who were able to produce the charm powerful enough to be of any use. The cold was truly settling in on him now, and he began to feel the effects which made it difficult to maintain the spell. He could see that his colleagues were faring no better, but he would not give in, though. He steeled himself and pushed as hard as he could with his magic. His Phoenix grew brighter, but he knew it would not be enough to put the odds in his favor. He was beginning to lose hope when he suddenly heard a screech of rage from one of the beasts and looked up to see a huge Thestral Patronus ploughing through the air, beating its powerful wings and defending the village without abandon. Albus Dumbledore smiled as he felt the warmth and hope fill him. There was only one young man capable of such a feat. Harry Potter had come to their aid. Break. Daphne Greengrass knew that she was at her limit, and was feeling the last of her magical reserves leaving her body in her attempt at repelling the Dementor that had attacked her. Upon realizing what had happened, she had tried to hurry to find her sister and best friend when she encountered the creature. She had been working on her Patronus for months, and had only been able to produce a silvery misty shield at best, which was much harder in the moment when it mattered. She felt her shield fail, and knew that this was it. She was going to be killed before she had even left school. She felt disorientated and slightly delirious from the effort it had taken to even fight, as well as she had. She thought she could hear the galloping of hooves, followed by a terrifying screech. She felt as though she had been hoisted from the ground, then she knew no more. She came to her senses, feeling very light and warm, as though she was in a gentle and comfortable embrace. If this was heaven, then she would be content with this feeling eternally. She could still hear the screams, and was confused as to why she could still hear the happenings of the village in the afterlife. She opened her eyes and found that she was in the arms and pulled gently against the muscular chest of a young man. The first thing she noticed as she looked up was a bright emerald fire in his eyes, beautiful emerald eyes that were radiating a power, but it was not a power that made her shudder in apprehension. On the contrary, it was a power that made her feel safe and added to her already comfortable state. "You have very beautiful eyes," she murmured in her delirium, and pulled herself closer to the young man instinctively and nestled her head deeper in his chest. She felt the man chuckle and shake his head. "Thank you, miss," the man replied in obvious amusement. "Am I in heaven?" she mumbled, causing him to chuckle again. "If you are, then I am honored that I am your idea of a suitable afterlife, my lady," he responded, sounding even more amused. It was then that Daphne realized she was in fact not dead, as she heard the voice of Astoria cut into her bliss. "Who the hell are you, and what are you doing with my sister?" She heard her question, the young man angrily. "Calm down, miss," he replied quietly. "Your sister was being attacked by a Dementor. I helped her, and she passed out," he explained. "Yes, well, you can put her down now," she retorted, clearly annoyed to find her sister in the arms of a man. She felt him shrug before he addressed her. "Are you okay to stand, miss?" he asked. Daphne nodded reluctantly and felt herself being placed gently on her feet. She shot her sister a look to express her annoyance before turning to face the man. He was tall and muscular, with short dark hair, and was well groomed. He had the brightest green eyes she had ever seen that was still simmering with the undercurrent of power she could see there, but the eyes looking back on her were now looking at her with concern in them. She could get lost in those eyes, and she wouldn't even care. She shook her head. Daphne Greengrass did not fawn over boys. It was then that she saw the wand that he was holding, and her eyes widened in shock. "It was you," she stammered, pointing at him. "Me?" he questioned, looking confused, clearly thinking that she was still delirious. "Yes, it was you. You saved my mother," she explained, looking at Tracy and Astoria, who by now had also noticed his wand. "I did?" he asked again. "Yes, the apothecary in Diagon Alley. All she could remember was how unique your wand was," she explained, getting a little frustrated. "Ah," he replied in realization. "The beautiful blonde lady who looks much like yourself and your sister," he realized, indicating the sisters. Daphne flushed at the compliment that didn't go unnoticed by her friend, who raised her eyebrow at her. "Thank you for saving her." Astoria cut in, no longer annoyed at the mystery man. "Yes, thank you," Daphne echoed her sister's sentiments. "And thank you for saving me," she said shyly. "It looks like my family owe you," she added. The young man shook his head. "You don't owe me anything," he intoned. "I just did what I knew was the right thing," he explained. Strangely, he then removed a rat with a silver paw from his pocket and sighed in relief. "Now, if you ladies will excuse me, I have to go and clear my godfather's name," he declared, placing the rat in his pocket and nodding to someone behind the trio of girls. "Wait," Daphne shouted. But it was too late. The young man had disappeared without a sound. The group turned to see Professor Dumbledore watching them with his eyes twinkling madly. "Professor, do you know who he was?" Daphne asked the headmaster. "Yes, he is the young man who prevented a lot of loss and heartache today," the old man replied cryptically. "I meant his name, sir," Daphne responded. "Ah, he did not give you one?" he asked the girl, clearly amused. "No, sir," Daphne replied. "But he saved mine and my mother's life, and I wanted to be able to thank him properly," she explained. Even though the young man had insisted she nor her mother owed him anything, she at least wanted to show her gratitude and appreciation to him. There are not many who would intervene the way he had, and to do so twice was certainly something. "Yes, he is a rather special young man, isn't he?" the headmaster mused. "But if he did not give you a name, then it is not my place to," he explained firmly. "I'm sure all will be revealed soon enough," he added knowingly, with an amused twinkle in his eyes. With that, the trio left the company of the headmaster and made their way back to the castle, grateful that they had managed to survive an encounter with the now former guards of Azkaban. "He was gorgeous, wasn't he?" Tracy broke the silence dreamily. Daphne thought so, as Doria replied with a hint of mischief in her voice. "Oh, shut up, Tori," her sister retorted, and moved ahead of the other two, who seemed intent on teasing her because of her lapse in coherency in a moment of weakness. They made their way into the entrance hall and were stopped by Granger, Longbottom, and the two youngest Weasleys. "What happened?" Granger asked, having seen the state of some of the returning students. "Dementors," Tracy replied, shaking her head. "Oh my God," Hermione replied with wide eyes. "Is everyone okay?" she asked, clearly concerned. "Dumbledore seems to think so," Tracy answered the Gryffindor, who breathed a sigh of relief. "It was close to ending badly, though," Astoria cut in. "If it wasn't for that guy turning up with his Patronordus, it would have been bad," she surmised. "What guy?" Hermione asked with a frown. "Ask Daphne," Tracy responded, her eyes full of mirth. "She was the one who was in his arms," she added, laughing at her friend's look of betrayal. "Shut up, Tracy," Daphne hissed at her friend. "What happened?" Hermione asked, ignoring the teasing from Tracy. "I don't really know," Daphne admitted. "I was trying to fight off a Dementor and I pass out. I woke up and this guy was holding me," she explained. "Things were going bad," Astoria cut in. "They were everywhere, and the professors couldn't stop them," she continued, shaking her head. "Then there was this loud screech, and a really big Patronus came out of nowhere and chased them all away." "What was the Patronus?" the bushy-haired girl questioned the younger blonde. "I don't know. I've never seen a creature like it, but it was like a really big horse with wings, and it looked wrinkly. Oh, and it had a pointed tail and a weird face," she explained, her face screwed up in thought. "A Thestral," Hermione breathed. "A what?" the rest of the group asked in unison. "You can only see them if you have seen death," she explained. "They are supposed to be really bad luck because of it, but they are amazing creatures and very powerful and intelligent. They are really protective of their young and vulnerable members of the herd. If that guy has that as his Patronus, he must be quite something," she finished thoughtfully. "And he is gorgeous, isn't he, Daphne?" Tracy asked, nudging her friend with her elbow, who just growled in response. "He was the one who saved our mum," Astoria explained. "He had the wand." Hermione frowned. "Was there anything else about him?" she asked. "Well, he is tall and muscly and gorgeous." Tracy started listing off, but was elbowed by Daphne, who was clearly getting irritated by her friend. "Green eyes," Daphne said quietly. "He had really bright green eyes," she said again, a little shyly. "Oh, and he left without even giving a name," Tracy added. "He had a dead rat with him and said something about clearing his godfather," she finished. That final piece of information had the Gryffindors sharing knowing looks of shock and realization. "Harry," Hermione said breathily. "Huh?" Tracy questioned. "It was Harry. The rat must have been Pettigrew," she exclaimed. "But Harriet's Patronus is a stag," Ginny pointed out. "It can change," Hermione said dismissively. "Potter?" Astoria chimed in. "You're saying that was Potter," she said, looking amused. "Definitely," Hermione replied, clearly thinking. "Oh, this is great," Tracy suddenly cut in, laughing and pointing at Daphne. "You were saved by the golden boy and were melting into him. Don't even deny it. I saw that look you gave him," she added gleefully. Shut up, Tracy, Daphne hissed again, cursing herself for the way she had acted. Like I would be interested in Potter, she finished unconvincingly. Just as well, Ron piped up angrily. Harry wouldn't date a snake anyway. He hates all of you, he spat, and had a bitter grin on his face. The three Slytherins, knowing that Weasley would be on a rant for a while, decided to make their excuses and leave and go back to their common room. Daphne quickly made further excuses so she could be alone for a while, citing that she was tired. She sat on her bed in her dormitory, lost in thought. She couldn't believe that she had been saved by Potter. Not that she had anything against him personally, but if word got out about the way she acted, then it would be a nightmare for her. She was grateful that tomorrow was the start of the holidays and that this could all just blow over. She would have to have a word with her sister and so-called best friend to ensure they kept their mouths shut. Break. Harry arrived back in the drawing room to an expectant Arcturus, who just looked at the boy with an impatient expression marring his face. Well, he questioned when Harry said nothing. Harry reached into his pocket and removed the still stunned animagus and dangled him in front of the older man, his face splitting into a triumphant grin. Good work, Potter, Arcturus praised. Now we can get that idiot grandson of mine free finally. Harry nodded in reply. I will let Sirius know we have him, he replied. Good. And make sure you take the rat directly to Amelia Bones. She's a fair woman and will do what is right. If she doesn't, then do whatever you have to do to make sure that Sirius gets his trial. Understood, he finished questioningly. I'll take the rat, but first me and Peter have a little catching up to do, he replied with a cruel smile. Arcturus shook his head at the boy. I understand, he began, but do not kill him, he instructed firmly. We need him alive, and don't you forget it, he finished sternly. He knew Potter would want to confront the man Hell. He had more right than any. He just wanted to make sure the boy didn't forget what was at stake here, and make the same mistake his moronic grandson made. I won't kill him, Harry promised, but he might just wish I had, he added with malice and clear intentions. With that, Harry left the drawing room and took the rat to the training room. He conjured a chair and placed Pettigrew on it and pointed his wand at the traitor. He flicked his wand at the rat and it slowly changed into the man he had met almost 2 years ago, the man that was responsible for the death of his parents, and the man that was the cause of the second rise of the Dark Lord. Harry looked at the man with disgust. Just his breathing offended him and made him feel a hatred he had never felt before. He flicked his wand towards the man and bound him to the chair. Enerve it, he muttered, causing the rat to stir. Peter Pettigrew awoke in an unfamiliar room and immediately saw that he was being watched by a young man with eerily green eyes that instantly put him on edge and feel a trickle of fear seep into his very being. He realized he was bound to a chair, and despite his efforts, he could not transform. The Dark Lord will kill you for interfering in his plan, he explained to the young man who just narrowed his eyes. Oh, I hope he tries, the man replied, laughing. It was not a joyous laugh, but a cold one that truly dared the ire of the Dark Lord to turn to him, and it made Peter very uncomfortable. You managed to escape me in France, you fucking traitor, but I knew I would get you in the end. The man spat and snarled at Peter. A sudden realization hit him, and the animagus began to tremble uncontrollably. This was the man he had seen destroy his entire team. Peter knew he was truly in trouble now. Whatever I did, I'm sorry, he tried pleadingly. I don't even know who you are, he finished lamely. The man just raised an eyebrow at him and continued to stare. It was several moments before he spoke again. So you don't recognize the son of your so-called friends? He asked. The friends you sold out to Voldemort, you cowardly shit, he roared, his eyes flaring even brighter in anger. It was then that Peter realized who this was. But how could it be? He had seen the Dark Lord kill him. He remembered the boy from 2 years ago, the small, underfed boy who had pleaded with Black and Lupin to spare him. He felt a brief moment of hope that he would be spared again, but catching the young man's eyes, he knew that would not be the case.
Harry?
He asked disbelievingly. So you finally see it, do you? Harry replied coldly. You're not going to kill me. You're not like them, Peter managed to reply unconvincingly and sweating profusely from the nervousness he was feeling. "You're right, Peter. I won't kill you," the teen replied, much to the relief of the other man. "But I am going to make you suffer, 'cause you a fraction of the pain you caused me. Sirius and Remus," he added icily, and began to walk towards the shaking man. "What? What are you doing?" the rat stammered out, clearly terrified. Harry looked at the rat calculatingly before giving a single-word answer. "Justice," he replied callously. The next several hours would be the worst of Peter Pettigrew's life. Many times he wished that the teen would just kill him, but it was not to be. By the end of his ordeal, he had screamed his vocal cords raw, and he had and was experiencing a pain he never thought possible. He found himself looking forward to being handed over to the Auras. At least there he would be safe from Harry Potter. Platform 9, Havnethurst, the next day was filled with worried and frantic parents waiting for their children arrive for the Easter holidays. They had, of course, been informed of the attack in Hogsmeade yesterday, and now almost every parent of the students seemed to be waiting to make sure that no harm had come to them personally. One such couple were the Greengrass parents. Ophelia and Jonathan were waiting with Davis' family, having spent a restless night and day for the moment their children would be safely back with them. Jonathan in particular had not slept ever since his wife had been attacked. He had not been able to relax and had been very on edge. Finding out that his 2 daughters had been in such danger had pushed him over that edge, and he just wanted them with him so he could hold them in his arms and see that they were truly okay. After what seemed like an eternity, the train pulled into the station, and the students slowly began to exit the train. Tense eyes scanned each child as they left impatiently, slowly turning into relief when the recognition of their child registered, others continuing the tense search, seeking that same relief. Eventually, the tension subsided, and each parent and child were reunited. They were safe. Miraculously, they were all safe. Jonathan pulled his daughters into his arms and held them for everything he was worth. He was not usually an overtly emotional man, and it was not often that he would be seen giving public displays of affection such as this. But today was different. Today he was a father first and foremost, his reputation be damned. "Are you girls okay?" he asked the trio, when Has was satisfied they were physically well. "Fine, Dad," Daphne replied quietly. "All thanks to your hero," Tracy chimed in, feigning a swoon that caused Astoria to laugh. "Hero?" Jonathan asked with a frown. "Yep," Astoria responded, looking mischievous before her sister could. "The same boy who helped Mum, the one with the wand," she added, turning to her mother. This piqued Jonathan's interest greatly. "Is that so?" he asked with a raised eyebrow. "And did you happen to catch the name of this mystery wizard?" he added. He himself was keen to track the young man down. He had spent the last few months making discreet inquiries, but to no avail. The man had saved his wife and now had seemingly come to his daughter's aid also. He wanted to show the young man his gratitude for rescuing the most important thing to him, and now it seemed he truly owed the wizard. "Not here," Daphne growled in an annoyed tone to her best friend and sister, turning and walking towards the barrier. "What's wrong with her?" Ophelia asked the other 2 teens. "She's been in a bad mood all day," Astoria responded. "I think she's embarrassed," she finished with a shrug. "Embarrassed? Are you going to explain what happened?" she questioned the 2 impatiently. "Yes, but Daphne is right. Not here," Astoria replied, indicating the large crowd. "Back home it is then. Are you coming, Robert, Susan?" Jonathan asked Tracy's parents. "We are just as keen to get to the bottom of this as you are," Robert responded, eliciting a nod of agreement from his wife. "Lead the way," he shrugged. The group made their way to the apparition point where Daphne was waiting for them, looking impatient. The parents apparated the teens to the Greengrass home where they could talk more privately. Jonathan led them to the lounge area and gestured for everyone to take a seat. Daphne did so reluctantly. "So what happened yesterday?" Jonathan asked. "We were told it was a Dementor attack, but we didn't get any details," he explained. "The village was busy," Tracy began, "so we split up. Me and Tori needed some things from the potion shop, and Daphne went to Honeyduke's. We heard screaming but didn't pay any attention to it at first. When we went outside, it was really cold, and they were everywhere," she explained with a shudder. "The professors were trying to fight them, but there were too many." "How many?" Robert cut in. Easily over 100. Tracy replied, to which Astoria nodded. Well, out of nowhere we heard one of them screech, and we saw a huge Patronus fly in and sent them off. She continued. A Thestral, Astoria piped up. It sent them all away with Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Flitwick's help, she explained. We went looking for Daphne and saw her in his arms. It was his Patronus. Tracy finished. Daphne? Her mother questioned. Daphne sighed in resignation but knew her mother would want to know. I came out of Honeydukes and heard the screams and could feel the cold. I tried to find those two and was attacked by a Dementor, she continued quietly. I tried to fight it off, but my Patronus isn't strong enough, she explained, disappointedly. I felt myself getting weak and then my spell failed and I woke up in his arms, but I think I heard hooves and the Dementor screech and he caught me before I fell, she finished. Well, just the fact you can produce any kind of Patronus is a hell of a feat, and you should be very proud. Her father praised. What happened next? He asked further. Daphne turned red at the question, not wanting to answer. Well, we came over and Daphne looked very happy in his arms. Tracy cut in, her eyes full of mirth. What was he laughing at, by the way? You didn't tell us, she asked her friend. Shut up, Tracy. I thought I was dead, Daphne retorted heatedly, turning red further. Daphne, her mother questioned. I told him he had beautiful eyes, all right. Can you just drop it now, she responded irritably. And if you tell anyone, I will kill you, she threatened the two teens. Tracy and Astoria burst out laughing to the point they had tears in their eyes. It was the fact that Daphne had even said it that amused them so much. It was so out of character to the point of hilarity. After the two had composed themselves, it was Tracy who attempted to come to her friend's rescue. You are right, though. Everything about him is beautiful, Tracy intoned dreamily. Oh, shut up, Daphne replied simply. You still haven't told us who he is, Jonathan interrupted. Oh, that is the best bit, Tracy replied instantly, looking very amused again. It was Potter. Daphne was happily in the golden boy's arms, she added with a grin. Potter? As in Harry Potter? Jonathan asked, clearly surprised. The one and only, Tracy responded. So he's been found then? Robert asked. Not exactly, Tracy replied. He didn't tell us his name. It was his friends that worked it out. Dumbledore saw him and wouldn't give us his name either, she explained further. Not that it matters anyway, Daphne cut in after finally composing herself. What do you mean? Jonathan asked. Well, I explained that he had saved Mum, which he remembered, and when I said that our family owes him, he just shrugged it off and said we didn't owe him anything, and that he was just doing the right thing. Daphne explained. And he said you were beautiful, just like your mother. Tracy added, much to the chagrin of the blonde. Shut up, Tracy, or so help me, I will hex you, Daphne threatened. Well, the boy clearly has good taste in women, Jonathan added, receiving a slap to the shoulder from his wife, who had turned red. Be that as it may, Ophelia began, I would like to thank him in some way. I guess none of you know how to contact him, she asked the teens. Actually, Longbottom sent him an owl and he replied last year, Tracy answered, remembering the previous meeting they had. And I'm guessing Dumbledore knows how to contact him too, she added. Ophelia nodded. Then we shall invite him for dinner, she stated, gaining different reactions from those assembled. Oh, please, Mum, no, Daphne pleaded. It's embarrassing enough, she moaned. Oh, I have to be here for that, Tracy demanded, her eyes alight with amusement once again. It's the least we can do, Daphne, her mother replied firmly. Don't worry, Daphne, Astoria chirped. You get to tell him how pretty his eyes are again. She finished, causing everyone except her sister to laugh. Daphne half growled, half screeched, and left the room in a huff. She's been like that since she found out it was Potter who saved her. Astoria pointed out. Ophelia intoned. She's torn, she concluded, getting a nod from Susan. Torn? Tracy questioned with a frown. Clearly she likes the boy, her mother explained, but because of who it is, she won't admit it. She explained knowingly. Tracy whispered in understanding. There was me thinking she swung the other way, she added. Tracy, her mother reprimanded. Well, she's almost 16, and up until yesterday she had never shown any interest in boys. What was I supposed to think? She asked rhetorically. There was no need to be so crass about it. Her mother reprimanded her again. I guess it didn't help with what that Pratt Weasley said. Astoria spoke up. Weasley? What did he say? Ophelia asked with a frown. He's one of Potter's friends, and he said that Daphne wouldn't stand a chance with him, she shrugged. He is probably right, though, Tracy added. Pretty much everyone in our house has given Potter grief. He has no reason to like any of us, she pointed out. You mean Malfoy and the idiots he hangs around with, and the Quidditch team, Astoria interjected. Yeah, well, Potter does have a tendency to embarrass them all, Tracy replied, but Daphne hasn't ever spoken to him apart from yesterday, she mused. Doesn't matter, she's still one of us. Astoria shrugged. Yes, well, I'm going to write to the boy. He might not even respond. Ophelia cut in. Yes, Tracy, say goodbye to Astoria and Daphne. It is time for us to head home. Robert addressed his daughter. Oh, if he does reply, I want to be there. Tracy requested. Yes, Tracy, Ophelia replied, shaking her head. With that, she left the room to write a letter to the Potter boy. Never in a million years would she have guessed it was him that had saved her that day. Break. Harry went to the drawing for breakfast and was confronted with an annoyed-looking Arcturus, who just stared at the teen with a penetrating gaze. Feel better now? He questioned neutrally. It wasn't about making me feel better, Harry replied, taking a seat. There is nothing that can make me feel better about losing my parents, or the fact that Sirius spent 12 years in Azkaban and that I had to grow up with those bastards, he explained. I did what I did because that's what he deserved. He doesn't deserve to just be handed to the Aurors and get a cell in Azkaban away from the war. If I didn't need him to clear Sirius, then I would have killed him slowly, because that is what he deserves. No other reason, he finished a little heatedly. So it was justice? The older man questioned. Yes, but I won't pretend that I'm not glad that it was me that got to give it to him, Harry replied flatly. The older man shook his head, but he understood his reasoning. Just like your grandfather would have done, he sighed. Are you planning to hand him over any time soon? He asked. Today, Harry replied after finishing his mouthful of banana. Good, Arcturus responded. The sooner we get him in, the sooner the idiot will be free, he explained. I'll take him after breakfast, Harry promised. Good, the older man responded again. Did you get anything useful from him? He asked. Harry grinned. I know why he was there, what he was after, and exactly where it is, he informed the man triumphantly. Arcturus suddenly had a look of relief, quickly followed by one of amused anticipation. Finally, he said to himself. Break. Amelia Bones was sat in her office going through the mountain of paperwork that came with her job. The last 10 months had been nothing but stressful for the head of the DMLE, and it was only getting worse. The evidence that the Dark Lord had returned had been mounting since June, to a point she knew that even now it was going to be a disastrous time when it was revealed. The breakout from Azkaban had only added to her stress. Fudge had blamed Sirius Black, but Amelia knew otherwise. She knew that you-know-who was involved. She was frustrated by how obvious it was and how Fudge was blatantly ignoring everything she told him. Extortion and reports of attacks had increased tenfold, and she simply did not have the manpower to increase patrols or even protect the publicly the way she wanted to. Fudge was a moron, and he was going to be responsible for a lot of deaths. If anything, the idiot was making it very easy for the Dark Lord, and Amelia was powerless to do a thing. She shook her head in annoyance as she was pulled from her thoughts by a knock at the door. Enter, she commanded irritably. Madame Bones, there is a young man here to see you. Her assistant spoke as she entered. Who is it? She asked in annoyance. He didn't say ma'am, but he is insisting on seeing you and you only. He says it is important, the assistant explained. Amelia sighed. Send him in then, she said, waving dismissively. Shortly afterwards, a tall and muscular young man entered, dressed casually in a white t-shirt and light jeans and boots. That's how my auras should look, the older woman thought, taking in the young man's athletic appearance. How can I help you? She asked, shaking herself from her musings. Instead of saying a word, the young man removed a rat from his pocket and placed it on the desk before taking a seat and folding his arms. Amelia raised an eyebrow at her guest.
And what am I supposed to do with a rat? She asked irritably.
Oh, that is no rat, that is the ticket to my godfather's freedom, was the reply she got with an amused look. "And who would your godfather be, young man?" she asked, getting more annoyed by the minute. "Sirius Black," he replied casually. Amelia chocked and sputtered, but quickly composed herself. "Potter?" she asked, looking at him critically, who just nodded the affirmative. Amelia removed her wand and was about to lock her door when she found herself staring at the tip of a wand mere inches from her face. "I was just going to lock the door," she explained calmly, raising her free hand to placate the boy. Harry nodded and replaced his wand back in its holster. Amelia shook her head and locked the door with a flick of her wand. "Damn, you're fast," she observed, shaking her head again. "I have to be," Harry replied, shrugging. "Care to explain?" she asked, gesturing to the rat still sat limply on her desk. Madame Bones," Harry began, "let me introduce you to Peter Pettigrew, the traitorous bastard who betrayed my parents," he finished coldly. He then removed his wand and flicked it towards the rat. In a matter of moments, a short and squat man, missing most of his right arm, now laid where the rat had been. He had certainly been through the mill and was quite badly beaten. He was covered in various cuts and bruises, and the stump of his arm had been cauterized crudely. "He put up a surprisingly good fight," the boy explained, with a shrug. "I'm sure he did," Amelia replied, choosing to ignore the condition of the man. "It looks like I have more work to do," she sighed. "I just want Sirius to get a fair trial. He never had one before, and I know he is innocent," Harry explained. "It was the rat who was my parents' secret keeper," he finished. "Fudge won't allow it if he finds out. You've put me in quite the position, Potter," she explained. "Then we have to be shrewd," Harry responded. "As the head of the DMLE, you have the power to call an emergency meeting of the Wizengamot, I understand," Harry spoke in a questioning tone. "I do," Amelia answered, seeing where this was going.
"Then you don't tell him and call an emergency meeting with an impromptu trial, then he won't be able to intervene," Harry explained.
"Sirius is a member of an ancient house, and everyone on the Wizengamot will have to allow the trial, if only to protect their own rights," he finished knowingly. "That might just work, Potter," Amelia conceded thoughtfully. "But it seems that I'm the one sticking my neck out here," she pointed out. "True," Harry agreed. "If there is anything I can do for you, then of course I will," he offered. Amelia thought for a moment before answering. "I want you to be there," she requested with a nod. "It will offer your godfather more credibility if you are there supporting him, and it will make Fudge look bad," she added with a smirk. "I can make Fudge look bad if that's what you want. I told him almost 2 years ago that Sirius was innocent, and he ignored me and wouldn't believe me about the rat," Harry explained. "And because of him, nothing is being done about Riddle," he stated with a raised eyebrow towards the woman. "My hands are tied," Amelia replied. "He won't listen, and he's ignoring everything," she continued, frustrated. "I don't have the funds nor the men to make any difference right now," she finished. "Then Fudge needs a wake-up call, or he needs to go." Harry responded. "And how would we achieve that?" she questioned the boy. "I could kill him," Harry replied casually. "You do realize I could arrest you for saying that?" Amelia warned, raising her eyebrow at the boy. "You could, but you won't," Harry responded. Amelia just shook her head. "Malfoy is the real problem. He's got Fudge firmly wrapped around his finger," she explained. Now Malfoy I can handle," Harry grinned, already formulating a plan in his mind. "It will take a little time, but I'm sure it will work," he explained. "Are you going to share your idea?" Amelia asked. "The less you know, the better, Madame Bones," Harry answered. Plausible deniability. "And all that," he added with a grin that caused Amelia to shake her head once more. "Don't make me arrest you, Potter," she pleaded. "Because I will deny everything if you get caught," she warned. "Funny that that's exactly what I am planning," Harry mused, looking a little smug. "I really don't want to know," Amelia replied, clearly flustered by the apparent recklessness the boy was displaying. "I will call the emergency meeting for the day after tomorrow in the morning," she decided aloud. "It gives us a day to get ready. Does he have a representative?" "He will have," Harry answered. Amelia unlocked the door, opened it, and gave some instructions to her assistant. "I just sent for some auras to deal with him," she explained, pointing to Pettigrew. "Don't worry, I trust these men with my life," she added when she saw Harry was about to protest. 5 minutes later there was a knock on the door, and Mad-Eye Moody and Kingsley Shacklebolt entered the room. Upon seeing the unconscious form of Pettigrew on the desk and Harry in the room, Kingsley's eyes widened and Moody roared in laughter, leaning heavily on his staff. "Got him then, did you, lad?" Moody growled in amusement. "I didn't know you and Potter were acquainted, Alastor," Amelia interjected with a raised eyebrow. "Aye, Amelia, I duelled the lad for his eau de Biawel," Moody replied, thinking quickly and a little reluctantly. "That's why you were looking worse than you usually do back in January," Kingsley cut in. "Why didn't you say?" "Aye, we had a good fight," Moody replied. "I was asked to keep my mouth shut about it. It's not anyone's business. The boy was doing his O-devils," he added, giving the other a stern glare. Harry took the hint that he was not supposed to know these men and stood to introduce him. "Hello, sir," he said to Kingsley. "I'm Harry Potter," he added, extending his hand to the man. "Kingsley Shacklebolt," the man returned. "You've had us all rather worried, Mr. Potter," he continued. "Well, as you can see, Ora Shacklebolt, I'm quite all right," Harry answered. "What happened to his arm?" Moody suddenly cut in. "Accident," Harry answered casually. "You said he put up quite the fight," Amelia added, staring at the boy. "Same thing," Harry shrugged. "I got what he deserved if you ask me," Moody surmised. "You recognize him then?" Amelia asked the heavily scarred man. "I, Pettigrew, apparently killed by Black, who was thrown straight in Azkaban without a trial. We were told to keep quiet, and that was that," he finished with a shrug. "I need you two to watch him. He will be going to trial the day after tomorrow," she instructed. "Neither of you are to leave him, and you will not speak a word of this to anyone. Understood?" she asked firmly. "Aye, ma'am," Moody replied. "Yes, ma'am," Kingsley followed. "Good, I'm relying on you both. Now get him out of here," she commanded. The two men disillusioned the body and carried it between them. They both gave Harry a nod before exiting, leaving the head of the DMLE alone with the team. "He will get his trial, Potter. Make sure you're there," she pressed. "I will be. I will bring him with me," Harry promised, and left quickly to give Arcturus and Sirius the good news. Harry arrived home and sent Dobby to give Sirius the message to be ready for him to collect. He would use the cloak to get him in, knowing it was the best way under the circumstances. He then sent Dobby to Andromeda and Ted to inform them of the development. Their reply stated that they would be ready and would see him there. Harry made his way to the drawing room after he had finished his correspondence to inform Arcturus of the plan. "Good," Arcturus replied when Harry told him what had happened. "I will be coming with you," he announced. "I don't trust Fudge and the morons around him to not fuck this up in some way. My title will at least give him some levity," he explained. "And with you getting the last piece of information I need from the rat, there is no need for me to be inconspicuous anymore. I've grown weary and bored of the shadows, and I feel like kicking a few asses," he finished with a look of cruel amusement. "It looks like a few people are in for a rude awakening then," Harry intoned. Arcturus just nodded. "This came for you earlier." He broke off suddenly, handing Harry an envelope. Harry took the letter and read it with a confused expression. "The girl must have worked out who I am," he said to himself with a frown. "What girl?" Arcturus asked. "Oh, I helped a girl yesterday and apparently her mother in the alley a few months ago," he explained. "What do you know about the Greengrass family?" he asked the older man. "Not much," he replied thoughtfully. "Old family and neutral," he added with a shrug. "Why?" he questioned. "They've invited me for dinner tomorrow," Harry replied. "It might be worth going," Arcturus advised. "They have a seat on the Wizengamot and could be a difference maker if things go tits up," he suggested. "And it doesn't hurt to make connections," he added. "You never know when they could be useful." Harry nodded. "It couldn't hurt, I guess," Harry responded and penned his reply. He sent it off with Hedwig, who was happy to finally have something to do. With that done, Harry spent the rest of his day training and reading. He still had improvements to make, and he knew he would need to be at his best soon if he was to put his plan into action. Break. Daphne awoke, stretched and groaned at the thought of what was happening today. Harry Potter was coming to dinner. She had hoped that he would refuse the invitation sent by her mother, but he had surprisingly accepted. The truth was that Daphne was a little embarrassed about what had happened, even though she hated to admit it to herself. The thing that bothered her about the entire situation was how vulnerable she had made herself appear, and that did not sit well with the blonde teen. She had nothing against Potter hell. She had never spoken to the boy, but she knew there was no love lost between him and the members of her house. She had cursed herself repeatedly on her reaction upon waking and finding herself in his arms. She had never looked at a boy and felt that wow factor that she had read about as a little girl. That was until that moment. It made her feel more vulnerable than she ever had, and it bothered her that she was not uncomfortable with the feeling. It was the thought of the ease of comfort she felt that made her uncomfortable. But the biggest problem of the entire situation was the fact that the wow factor came to her with a boy who was seemingly unattainable for her, especially if she went by what Weasley had said, another thing that bothered her. As much as she tried not to, she couldn't help but think of how nice it felt to be in his arms, how nice it was to open her eyes and see that emerald fire, and how nice it felt to feel so safe despite the danger that was around her. She shook her head. No, she would not allow herself to think about it, no matter how much she enjoyed it and wanted to feel it again. She would not allow herself to appear so vulnerable the same way, and she would not allow herself to get lost in those desires the way she truly wanted to. It was going to be a long evening, but she would keep her guard up and not let it falter in front of Harry Potter. Break. Harry had spent his day training and was just finishing getting dressed for his dinner appointment with the Greengrass family. He decided to forego the formality of wearing robes and decided to dress in a white-fitted short-sleeve shirt, tailored black trousers, and some stylish chocolate Chelsea boots. He topped off his look with a black pea coat, keeping his dress smart but fairly casual. He made his way to the drawing room to inform Arcturus that he was leaving and to receive the no doubt last-minute advice the man would give. Upon entering, he was given the nod of approval for his outfit, and the older man addressed him as expected. "Remember your manners, Potter," he began. "These people have invited you into their home, and you will address them as Lord and Lady Greengrass, unless you are told otherwise. Understood?" he asked, to ensure the teen was listening. "Yes, sir," Harry replied gratefully, knowing he was not well versed in wizard etiquette as well as he should be. "Good, then be off." Arcturus dismissed the teen. Harry gave him an amused look. "You seem keen to get rid of me. You wouldn't happen to have a hot date, would you?" he questioned cheekily before disapparating. Arcturus growled. "Fucking Potter," he mumbled. "I will curse that insolent little shit," he vowed with a shake of his head. "Break." Harry appeared in front of a large set of gates as per the instructions of the invitation. The house was very impressive. It was a massive Victorian-style building that one would read about if they cared to browse classical literature. It was set on a slight hill and was made from brick with heavy timber beams placed intravenously throughout the architecture. The lawns were well kept, and the entire property was surrounded by high railings that matched the black and gold gate. It was then that Harry realized he was dealing with a family of class and suddenly felt a little underdressed. There was nothing he could do now, knowing that it would be much more rude to be late than dressed the way he was. He made his way to the door and composed himself. It was important for him to show his independence and strength, but to be respectful and not intimidating. It was a delicate balance that had been explained to him by Arcturus. He had to be strong, but not come across as though he felt he was better than them. They should be treated as an equal. He knocked on the door and waited to be admitted. The door opened to reveal a young-looking house elf that was dressed in a very clean white apron, with the family crest stitched lovingly into the front of the garment. "Master Harry Potter, sir," the elf greeted him. "Please follow me and I will take you to my master and mistress," the elf instructed. "Thank you, Tilly, sir," the elf responded, blushing a little. "Thank you, Tilly," Harry said with a smile. "Please lead the way." The elf led him through the beautifully decorated entrance hall that was largely neutral colors. The thing that set it apart from most other houses was the amount of family portraits and photos that were on the walls. They eventually came to a dining room, and Harry was taken aback by the number of people waiting for him. He had expected 4, but there were 7. "Mr. Potter, it is Mr. Potter, isn't it?" A tall and mousy-haired man addressed Harry. "Welcome to our home," he said, approaching with his hand extended. "Technically, it is Lord Potter, but please call me Harry," the teen insisted. "And thank you for your invitation, Lord Greengrass." "It is much appreciated," he replied, and shook the man's hand firmly. "Well, you are very welcome, Harry. Let me introduce you to the rest of the people here," he said, leading Harry to the assembled group. "This," he explained, indicating to the other man in the room, "is Lord Robert Davis, and his wife, Lady Susan Davis," he finished. Harry shook the man's hand, gave the lady a bow and a gentle kiss on the back, the hand as was custom. "It is a pleasure to meet you both," he intoned. "The pleasure is ours, Lord Potter," the man replied with a warm smile, which Harry returned. "And this," Lord Greengrass cut in, "is my wife, whom you have already met, I believe," he finished with a raised eyebrow. Harry recognized the woman immediately and took her hand and brushed his lips across the back of her knuckles. "It is nice to meet you in much more pleasant circumstances, my lady," Harry greeted her with a bow. "Likewise, Lord Potter," Ophelia replied with a smile and a slight curtsy. "And finally, the three young ladies here are my daughters, Daphne and Astoria," he introduced, gesturing to the two blonde girls who looked very much like their mother, "and Tracy, the daughter of Lord and Lady Davis," he finished, indicating the final girl who had brown hair and seemed to take more after her father in looks. "Ladies," Harry acknowledged with a bow. "Lord Potter," they replied in unison with a curtsy of their own. "Okay, now that is strange for me. Please call me Harry or Potter if you prefer," he requested to the group. Jonathan laughed. "Of course, Harry. Tilly would please take Harry's coat," he asked of the elf. Harry removed his coat, folded it, and handed it to the elf. "Thank you, Tilly," he said, looking her in the eye, causing the elf to blush again. "Please have a seat," Jonathan offered, to which Harry accepted the indicated chair. The group sat in silence before it was broken by Ophelia. "I just wanted to thank you, Harry, for helping me and Daphne the way you did," she spoke to the teen genuinely. "You're welcome," he replied. "I was just in the right place at the right time," he explained. "You haven't had any more trouble, have you?" he asked. "I have been keeping an eye on the alley, but I can't be there all the time," he added. "Well, there are very few who would intervene. Almost anyone else would turn a blind eye. So I am truly grateful," she responded with another warm smile. "And no, there hasn't been any other problems, thankfully," she finished. "Yes, I would like to thank you. Also, Harry, if it wasn't for you, then I may have lost my wife and my daughter," Jonathan added with a look of concern. "I just did the right thing, sir," Harry reiterated. "Well then, I'm grateful that you were there to do it, aren't we, Daphne?" he said, shooting his eldest daughter a look. "Yes, thank you, Potter," the girl replied somewhat coolly. It was then that Tilly brought in the first course of dinner, and the group ate their soup in silence for a minute until Susan Davis broke the silence. "I must say, Harry, you are very developed for a 15-year-old, she pointed out. Mum, Tracy gasped, horrified by her mother's comment. Harry just laughed. "I had my magical maturity last year," he explained casually, "and I train a lot," he added. "Really, already?" Ophelia asked with raised eyebrows. "How long did it last?" she questioned further. "Now, dear, that is a very personal question to ask a young man," Jonathan chided. "It's okay, sir," Harry replied, chuckling. "It lasted 11 days, he informed the lady. He was suddenly startled by the sound of several spoons clattering against bowls as the adult occupants at the table dropped the cutlery they were holding. 11 days? Jonathan choked. "What's the big deal?" Tracy asked, unsubtly. "The average wizard goes through their maturity between 17 and 21 years old," Jonathan explained, "and it usually lasts between 3-5 days. The fact that Harry has already had his and it lasted that long makes him quite the exceptional wizard," he concluded. "His Patronovus is definitely impressive," Astoria piped in. "And the bludgeoner he hit the Death Eater in the shop with was very powerful," Ophelia added. "And the magic he used afterwards, too," she continued with a frown. "Where does a 15-year-old learn such things?" she asked Harry. "Out of necessity, mostly," Harry answered a little dismissively. Ophelia took the hint and changed the subject. "What about your wand? That was the only thing I remembered about you because you certainly didn't look like you do now," she said. "You're not wearing a disguise now, are you?" she questioned. Harry chuckled. "No, it would be quite rude to wear a glamour now," he replied, And my wands, he said, flicking the one in his wrist holster into his hand and summoning the other to his left hand, are quite unique, he pointed out with a frown. 2 wands? She questioned. May I? Ophelia asked, holding out her hand. Harry nodded and handed her one of the wands, keeping hold of the other firmly. A backup is definitely useful, Harry said. It is beautiful, she said appraisingly. What is it made from? She asked. White ash and obsidian, Harry explained, indicating the 2 separate elements. What about the core? She questioned further. The teens at the table were paying rapt attention, waiting for the answer. Hungarian horntail, heartstring, and golden griffin claw, Harry answered. Typical, Daphne mumbled. Basilisk venom and phoenix tears. He added, ignoring the girl. Jonathan let out a long, low whistle. That's quite a combination, he intoned. I'm guessing that's why the wood and the crystal are fused like that, he observed questioningly. Harry just nodded in reply. Does it have basilisk venom because you killed one? Astoria piped up. Who told you that? Harry asked suspiciously. Granger and Weasley, the girl replied with a shrug. I didn't know you were friends, Harry replied with a frown. It looks like I'll have to have a word with them when I see them about keeping their mouths shut, he added, clearly annoyed by his friends. Wait a minute, killed a basilisk? Ophelia asked with a raised eyebrow. Yup, in our second year, Tracy cut in. Someone opened the Chamber of Secrets and Potter went in and killed it with a sword, she told the adults, who blanched. Surely that's not true, Harry. Susan stated, to which Harry sighed. I'm afraid it is, he replied. But they shouldn't have told you that, he added, looking at Tracy. And the reason I have the venom in my wand is because it bit me and I have the venom in my blood, he explained to Astoria. But you would be dead, Jonathan pointed out knowingly. It was healed by a phoenix, hence the phoenix tears, Harry responded. You are quite the marvel, Ophelia acknowledged, handing Harry back his wand, which he immediately replaced. I have heard that a few times, Harry replied with a chuckle. Tilly brought in the second course of the meal, and the table was quiet again while the occupants ate. May I ask you something, Harry? Ophelia asked. Of course, Harry responded. You said that there is always some truth in rumors that day in the shop. Does that mean he is really back? She asked a little nervously. Harry noticed that everyone was watching him, waiting to hear his reply. He is, he answered simply. How? Jonathan asked curiously. I know how, but it is not something that should be discussed at dinner, Harry advised. It is very disgusting and a very dark and very rare type of magic, he explained. The group heeded the warning that the teen gave and carried on eating. Why didn't you come back to school? Tracy asked. What have you been doing all year? She questioned further. Harry looked at her calculatingly for a moment before he answered. The night I was kidnapped, he thought he killed me, and he still thinks I'm dead, Harry explained. And I have been training mostly and hunting, he added. Then why are you here? Daphne asked irritably. Well, after tomorrow, I won't be hiding any more, Harry replied. Why tomorrow? Tracy asked. Because I will be at the Wizengamot meeting in the morning, making sure my godfather is set free, and no doubt Lucius Malfoy and the rest of his cronies will be there and will go running to tell his master, Harry responded. But there isn't a meeting tomorrow, Jonathan pointed out, looking confused. An emergency one will be called, Harry assured him. And what do you mean, your godfather? Robert cut in. Sirius Black, Tracy whispered. They told you that too? Harry asked, to which Tracy nodded. Sirius Black is your godfather? Susan questioned with raised eyebrows. Yes, and he is innocent, Harry retorted firmly. Peter Pettigrew is the one who was my parents' secret keeper, and he is the one who helped bring him back, he added. The adults were shocked at what they had just heard. That's what you meant by hunting. You were looking for Pettigrew. Ophelia cut in knowingly. I caught up with him eventually. Harry explained. He is now currently sat waiting to be brought to trial tomorrow. That will be quite the shock to Malfoy and his master, he added with a dark chuckle. The rat, Astoria interjected. That's why you were at the village, she stated. You're right, Harry confirmed with a nod. What are you going to do about you-know-who? Tracy asked. Surely you could just run away if he thinks you're dead, she pointed out. I'm going to kill him, Harry answered darkly, his eyes lighting in a gentle fury. I'm not going to run from him. He killed my parents and my grandfather, he growled. You can't be serious, Ophelia stated. Regardless of how grown up you look, you are just a child, she said, trying to appeal to the young man's sense of self-preservation. I've never been a child. He took that away from me, Harry returned quietly. The Muggles, Astoria chimed in knowingly. Do you know everything? Harry asked with a raised eyebrow. Pretty much, the girl replied with a grin. What does she mean, the Muggles? Jonathan questioned. Harry was raised by his aunt and uncle, and they were horrible to him, Astoria answered. And let's leave it at that, Harry interjected, silently cursing his friends. You said he killed your grandfather, Robert stated questioningly. Yeah, he attacked him in the middle of the night and caught him with a curse that killed him slowly, but my grandfather kicked his ass and sent him running. Harry explained with a grin. I didn't know that, the other man replied. In fact, I don't know much about your family at all, he added. What do you know? Harry asked curiously. Your grandfather was a baron and he killed giants. Astoria piped up with a smirk. That's general knowledge. The Potters have always been a reserved family and very private, Jonathan explained. That's what Granger said, Astoria grumbled irritably. Well, my family are famous for their fighting skills, Harry began, and fighting for people who can't fight and sticking up for people in need, he explained, giving Ophelia a look. My family motto is, honor thy blood, he continued. It means carrying on the family tradition of standing against tyranny and doing the right thing, fighting the fights for the people who need help. I'm still learning about them, but that is the gist of it, he finished with a shrug. So you're going to fight you-know-who because that's what is expected of you? Daphne asked disbelievingly. No, Harry replied. I'm going to fight him because I can't live my life knowing he is out there tearing families apart the way he did to mine, he explained. Then you're an idiot, and you're going to get yourself killed, Daphne replied, shaking her head. I didn't know you cared so much, Harry retorted. Like I care what you do, Daphne returned heatedly. Daphne, her mother hissed warningly to the girl. Well, obviously he's going to get himself killed, isn't he? She asked, as though it was an obvious conclusion. I should already be dead, Harry mumbled bitterly. What was that? Jonathan asked. Harry sighed. What do you know about the night I was kidnapped? He questioned. Nothing much, just that Diggory got killed. Tracy shrugged. Well, when I explain what happened, you'll understand, Harry sighed. He then went on to explain everything that happened at night and actually found it to be therapeutic. The only detail he left out was the fact that it was Arcturus who rescued him. By the time he was finished, the females at the table were crying, except Daphne, who refused to let her guard down, and the men were looking horrified. You got hit with another killing curse? Jonathan asked incredulously. Yeah, I'm guessing that's what started my magical maturity early. My body and magic need to be ready, he said with a shrug. And he really tortured you? Astoria asked, to which Harry just nodded. And you still want to fight him? Ophelia asked disbelievingly. I have to, Harry replied. Who else do you know that will? He asked. What about Dumbledore? Tracy asked. He's too old, Harry responded. You saw how he struggled with the Dementors, he pointed out. So the Gryffindor golden boy has to save the day as usual. Daphne cut in an annoyed tone. I didn't hear you complaining the other day, Harry retorted. Well, I didn't ask you for your help, Daphne responded hotly. Because you were unconscious, Harry pointed out. Would you rather that I left you to the Dementor? He asked. Yes, then I wouldn't have to live with the shame of being rescued by, she shouted and stormed from the room to the shock of the other occupants. I'm sorry for my daughter's behavior, Jonathan apologized to Harry. I don't know what came over her, he added. It's okay, Harry assured the man. It's because she's embarrassed about what she said the other day, Astoria chimed in. About you having beautiful eyes, she explained, seeing Harry looking confused. Ah, Harry said, then I should apologize. I didn't exactly help the situation, he pointed out. No harm done, Harry. She will get over it. Ophelia said, shooting a worried look at the door her daughter just left through. I guess I should go. I will be having an early start in the morning, Harry explained. I'm sure I will see you both there, he said to the two men, who nodded. I wouldn't miss it, Jonathan replied. Thank you for inviting me, and it really was nice to meet you all properly. Harry spoke while putting his coat on that Tilly had just handed him. "And you too, Harry. See you in the morning," Jonathan replied, shaking the young man's hand. After a chorus of farewells, Harry made his way out of the house and apparated home. Tomorrow was going to be a long day. Break. Daphne left the room feeling furious at herself. She had been doing so well. She managed to keep her guard up even when Potter smiled at her, and she wanted to smile back. She managed to keep control. She entered her room and threw herself onto her bed and buried her head into the pillow and began to sob uncontrollably. But she couldn't figure out why. She wasn't sure if it was because she was so angry or the effort to keep herself from crying when Potter explained what had happened that night had finally caught up to her. It had taken all of her willpower not to cry as the others had at what the boy had gone through, to the point that it actually made her heart ache. She was mad at him for making her feel that way, and was mad at him for thinking that it was him that had to fight the Dark Lord. A part of her wanted to hit the prat for thinking that way, and the other part just wanted to grab him and comfort him the way he had her after the attack. No, she shook her head. She just wanted to hit him for being a prat. The teen was experiencing a maelstrom of emotions that she had never felt before, and it confused her. She was upset, angry, and confused all at the same time. She had tried to convince herself that the feeling she had the other day for the boy had all been because of the situation. But the moment she saw him this evening, she had a desire to be held in those arms again, a feeling that she quickly fought down. Try as she might, she couldn't help but look at the boy and imagine the things she promised she wouldn't dwell on, and it had finally gotten too much for her, to the point that it frustrated and angered her, to the point that she lashed out, hoping that it would make her feel better if she angered him, the way she felt angry. What is so great about Harry Potter anyway? He is handsome and caring. He is selfless, and he gave her that feeling of safety and comfort without even having to try. He gave her that immediate feeling that left her awestruck and warm throughout her entire being. She shook her head again. No, she could not have those feelings for him. It could never work, could it? No, it couldn't. He would never look twice at a snake. Daphne resigned herself to the fact that she would just have to ignore what she felt for the boy. It just wasn't to be. He was Harry Potter, Gryffindor, Golden Boy, and he planned on fighting the Dark Lord. She was Daphne Greengrass, Slytherin, someone who Harry Potter would never look twice at. Daphne Greengrass tried to be logical in her approach, but even logic made no sense. All she knew for sure was that the boy infuriated her yet. She wanted him to hold her in his arms, even if it was just for one more minute, just so that she could feel that warmth and comfort again and savor it, imprint it into her very soul so that she could remember it for the rest of her life.